Chapter 281, The Limitations of Being a Main Character. The two hosts carefully analyzed the main storyline for the audience and followed it with the episode's main topic, Han Xiao. As the main character on planet Aquamarine, Han Xiao's character was frequently talked about on the forums, and other planets' players were also able to get to know him from the show. Han Xiao raised his eyebrow at this. It was not the first time that his name had appeared on Galaxy Times. It was a given, considering how much he had worked to raise his popularity among the players. With Han Xiao revealing his own identity and many more plot points behind the scene, Galaxy Times was able to come up with their version of Planet Aquamarine's main storyline. The players mainly agreed with what they said as well, as their explanation was pretty logical. From the players' perspective, Han Xiao had an essential role in the Six Nations and Germinal storyline. Now that the story had already been set in stone, his recent achievements emphasized his importance in the main storyline, allowing more players to become interested in him. I am very famous on planet Aquamarine, but my popularity is limited with the players from other planets. Getting reported on by Galaxy Times due to my recent actions could be counted as a kind of advertisement, Han Xiao muttered. The female host continued the segment. According to the above, Black Phantom played a main role in the Six Nations and Germinal storyline. Based on the information gathered by the players, we can make bold assumptions that every single main storyline will have a key character like Han Xiao, otherwise known as the planet's main character. We could even say that each planet's main storyline was started by someone like Han Xiao. Han Xiao shook his head a few times when he heard that. In truth, the main character of the Six Nations and Germinal storyline was the Germinal leader. But, that was not important. The male host picked up when the female host stopped. Logically, all NPCs are capable of starting events on their own, and the stronger and more experienced NPCs will be able to add diverse storylines into a planet's story. So, this also means that main storyline characters are limited by the map they're based in. In Black Phantom's case, he is currently a hot topic in Planet Aquamarine's main story, but does this mean that he will remain an important NPC in the future? Most likely not. His area of activity is limited to the beginner planet that he's on, and once space travel is unlocked in future versions, once important NPCs such as him will just become fodder. On the other hand, those NPCs that have ties with galactic organizations or entities will have the highest potential to affect future plot development. Another beginner planet, Ice-Winter Planet, was under the control of the Hell Demons, a powerful galactic entity, and is more likely to have NPCs who will develop into the later stages of Galaxy. Planets such as Planet Aquamarine and Planet Longtune with underdeveloped civilizations have less of a prospect. The show covered all sorts of topics, and some of the audience agreed while others argued against it. Once the hosts were done analyzing the situation on Planet Aquamarine, they moved on to interviewing the pro players. Han Xiao was not interested in this and stopped watching. He had thought that the show was going to keep on praising him, but it turned out that they only turned around to backstab him in the end. However, the hosts did have a point. It was like how LV1 players would get bullied by the bosses in the novice villages, but once the players leveled up, those bosses would become nothing but small fries. Han Xiao was also well aware the fact that Planet Aquamarine was not an impressive beginner planet. But that did not mean that he was going to just do nothing. Once he thought about his plan, he smirked and said, "We'll see about that." Bang! The alchemy room's door was first twisted before being blown off its hinges and smashing into all the tools and equipment on the table. Emerald Grass, who had her back to the door, was shocked and turned around to see what had happened. All she saw was a figure by the door with blazing red hair who was walking toward her with enmity. "What do you want?" Emerald Grass was alarmed and pointed at the intruder. Vines started to grow out of the surrounding crates and danced in the air like venomous snakes. Hyla was surrounded by a dark red energy, and with eyes also blazing with a crimson light, she said in a cold voice, "Give it." Emerald Grass frowned and walked to the side as she revealed a row of test tubes on a table, each filled with some sort of bright red liquid. She shook her head and asked, "Do you mean these potions? These are all developed from your sister's DNA. Do you want to try? They have pretty amazing effects." Hyla, without even hesitating, raised her hand and shot out her red energy toward the test tubes. Emerald Grass cursed silently and hurriedly moved her plants to block Hyla's attack to protect the potions. Bang! The dark red energy waves cut through the vines like hot knife through butter, and the clean cuts sprayed green juice all over the place. Emerald Grass barely dodged the attacks, and the walls around her were all blasted right through. Lunatic. Emerald Grass gritted her teeth and tried her best to block Hyla's attacks. The red energy waves clashed with the plants again and again, causing explosions to reverberate throughout the room and debris to fly all over the place. The guards outside were frightened, and they did not know who to help. Quick, inform Lord Black Phantom about this. The guard captain immediately made a decision and turned around. But before he could get very far, a black shadow had appeared at the end of the road and sped over. It was Han Xiao. Han Xiao was always monitoring the alchemy room, and the moment he saw the fight begin, he rushed over. Stop. Emerald Grass's forehead was covered in sweat. Her powers were not as strong as Hyla's when it came to direct confrontations, and she was afraid that she would sustain injuries the moment she stopped using her powers. I will stop if she stops. Hyla's expression remained unchanged as she had already steeled herself to kill Emerald Grass. Han Xiao frowned, and faint blue light started to gather under his feet. He lightly stepped, causing this energy to spread through the floor, causing a mini earthquake that split open the ground. Buzz. 8 metal gun barrels popped out of the ground, and one could hear sounds of gears locking into place. They quickly turned into mini turrets and were pointed straight at the two combatants. Trap-type mini-mobile turret. A new creation. They were placed in all the important areas in the shelter and could only be activated by Han Xiao. I think you may be forgetting who owns this place, Han Xiao said in a low voice. Hyla gritted her teeth but backed off in the end, albeit with a murderous expression still on her face. Emerald Grass finally relaxed and let out a breath as she massaged her temple. She had just been attacked in the mind by Hyla's shockwaves and was suffering from some painful headaches. You didn't keep up your promise of protecting my sister. Hyla turned her head and stared right into Han Xiao's eyes. Han Xiao sighed helplessly. You're overreacting. Emerald Grass held up one of the test tubes. Humph. I made these using the DNA I got from Aurora's hair strands. I was just recycling. I didn't even hurt your sister. What are you so mad about? You can't. Hyla said in a cold voice. To her, Emerald Grass's actions were too similar to Germinal's, and it made her remember some painful memories from the past. Neither wanted to back off, and Han Xiao's head was starting to hurt. Conflict with allies was not easy to resolve. At this moment, Aurora strolled over in her wheelchair, with the bear cub swinging back and forth on her legs. Aurora looked much better than she had done a month ago. Her once shriveled hair had become soft and smooth, her once bony body had started to take on some weight, and she was emitting a positive and shiny aura. Her power that had been suppressed for so long was finally released, and it allowed her to look like a normal person again within a month. Sis, why are you fighting with the doctor? Aurora asked in a worried tone. Emerald Grass stared at Hyla and then gave a thorough explanation of what had happened. Aurora was shocked. She blinked a few times, then said, It's just some hair. I don't really mind if it can help Uncle Han. Before, there was only her sister who treated her well. But now, with Han Xiao caring for her too, she was happy to contribute in any way she could. This way, she would feel better as she was somewhat paying back Han Xiao's favor. Han Xiao did not really have an opinion about this. He knew that Emerald Grass was conducting experiments, but since she only used some hair, he had just turned a blind eye to it. Hyla had definitely overreacted a bit this time. Aurora gave a bright smile and said, Sis, you don't have to worry. I'm not that fragile. Hyla remained silent for a while before she turned around and started to walk away. Okay. After this whole fiasco, Han Xiao let the guards take care of the cleanup. Emerald Grass walked up to him and had an odd smile on her face. I didn't know there were this many turrets near the alchemy room. You're keeping a watch over me, aren't you? Han Xiao gave her a glance. Hee. Don't worry. I'm not a fool. After all, I'm a tool that you obtained. Tools aren't supposed to have a say in anything. Emerald Grass twirled around with her hair as she said that with a faint smile. Oh. Han Xiao turned and left after only saying a word. Emerald Grass's expression froze. That's it? What kind of reaction was that? He was not angry, nor was he trying to give himself an excuse. He did not even try to threaten her or anything. Am I that unimportant? The curtains of the night were drawing to a close. After a whole day of manufacturing tools, Han Xiao moved the materials into his secret base. On the way back, he saw a figure standing on the balcony of the building next door. The gentle moonlight shone on the right side of Hyla's body, and he could see her staring blankly into the night sky. It seemed like she had been standing there for a while. After thinking for a moment, Han Xiao lightly leapt onto the balcony. Hyla heard the movement and asked emotionlessly without turning her head, "What are you doing up here?" "Just looking around." "Why are still up this late in the night?" "Humph." Hyla did not reply. Han Xiao then took a seat to the side and shook his head. "You were a bit too extreme today. I don't think you were that hot-headed in the past." Hyla frowned. "What's that got to do with you?" "What's it got to do with me?" Han Xiao touched his chin and muttered, "I don't think you said that back when I saved you and your sister, did you?" Hyla's face froze. After remaining silent for a while longer, she finally let out a sigh and said slowly, "I'm just a bit lost." Chapter 282, The Fall of the Germinal Organization. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Feeling lost? Han Xiao put a cigarette in his mouth and took out his lighter. "Well, that's easy to solve. Just take your sister back to the Germinal Organization, and I guarantee that you'll never feel bored again." Hyla glared at him and stayed quiet for a second. She then said to herself, "I wasn't able to protect my sister, and I made her endure so much suffering. It's all my fault. To protect her, I kept on training myself. Even though the battle carved a bloody past in my history, I will never regret what I did. The more lives I killed with my own hand, the safer I felt. It is the only way I could prove to myself that I was protecting my sister and wash away the remorse I have. Back in the Germinal Organization, we rarely saw each other. I knew that she wanted to go to the outside world, which is why I always prepared stories for her and shared my experience from the world outside. Now that she has a new life, is making many new friends, and has even started to take care of a pet, she won't need my stories anymore." Han Xiao could not light the cigarette in his mouth, so he brought out his gun and shot a few bullets up into the sky and used the hot gun barrel to light the cigarette. He inhaled before replying, "That bear was supposed to be my pet. Saving her from the misery had always been my wish. Now that I have fulfilled it." Hyla ignored Han Xiao's comment and continued, "She doesn't need me to protect her anymore." Hyla opened up her palm, and a dark red aura flowed through her fingers. Hyla stared at her hands and said, "Back in the days, all I wanted to do was spend every minute training my power to crush the Germinal Organization by myself. Now, my sister and I are safe, so strength and power don't matter to me anymore. I can spend all the time in the world with my sister, and this is my ultimate mate wish." Hyla then closed her hands and formed a fist, crushing the red light in her hand. She closed her eyes. "But the life I always craved only brings emptiness in my heart. I'm so lost and don't know what to do. I hate this feeling. After living a dangerous life for years, letting your guard down may be uncomfortable. This is the classic symptom that soldiers face as they leave the battlefield," Han Xiao answered. "Of course I believe that there's another reason. I think that violence is in your blood, and every single cell in your body craves the taste of blood. Living a peaceful life may be a drug that slowly chips away your motivation for living." Hyla had a weird expression and said, "Are you trying to get me to do bad things? What else? Do you want me to comfort you?" Han Xiao shook his head. "I don't need to tell you those cheesy and fluffy lines, and you are not a kind of person that needs consolation. Your sister is your sister, and you are you. You don't need to give up your true personality for your sister, and she also does not want you to change yourself. Stop finding excuses. I can see that battles and violence are what you truly desire, and the hunger for power is what drives you to move forward. The world is much larger than you think. Even though I can beat 10 of you, in the eyes of the universe, there are people that are still stronger than me. What makes you say that you can beat 10 of me?" Hyla disagreed. Han Xiao suddenly released a murderous intent in his eyes. Hyla stepped back and unknowingly used her power. She was cautious as the dark red light drifted around her body. "Maybe one day, I will take away your sister, just like what the Germinal Organization did. At that point, if you are still not strong enough to fight me. Haha. That's why you need to get stronger, or else you will regret it." Han Xiao withdrew his murderous intent with a straight face, but Hyla still could not calm down. For a moment, her instincts told her that Han Xiao was not kidding. He was dead serious. As if she saw the wolf's teeth behind a sheep mask, a chill traveled through her spine. "I can create some robots to help you train if you want, Or you can learn from emerald grass and practice with some other espers. Well, if there's nothing else, I'm going back to sleep. I'm leaving my cigarette here. Han Xiao jumped down from the rooftop and headed back to his place. After Han Xiao's shadow faded away, Hyla finally relaxed and let out a long sigh. Staring at the slowly burning cigarette, she picked it up and inhaled. She closed her eyes and released the smoke from her mouth, enjoying the taste from the tobacco. A long time passed before she opened her eyes. Her worries and anxiety suddenly disappeared, and all that was left was a cold, lonely feeling. He really is a monster, Hyla said to herself and laughed. But so am I. Han Xiao spent all his time creating machines and training Frenzied Sword and the other three. He harvested the player's experience, and the experience on the interface rose steadily. Every day was exciting and fulfilling, and time quickly passed by. On December 7, 688 in the Galaxy calendar, the front line finally sent back important news on the war. The Germinal organization had lost all control except the area around the headquarters. The other bases had all been destroyed. Han Xiao received the notice, and Bennett invited him to meet up in Sanctuary 1. The war against the Germinal organization is finally coming to an end. The cards are reshuffled, and the Darknet also needs to start looking at the new era, Bennett said over a phone call. After waiting for quite some time, the end of the war was finally in sight. The Six Nations were steady, and without any difficulty, they pushed the Germinal organization to the brink of destruction. Han Xiao arranged all the work in Sanctuary 3 and headed to Sanctuary 1. After a while, a helicopter landed on the roof of Sanctuary 1. Bennett, who was waiting on the roof, laughed. This is the first time you've arrived before anyone else. This isn't like you. Han Xiao turned back to the chopper and said, take off now. Waste all the fuel in this thing before we come back. Bennett was dumbfounded and quickly grabbed Han Xiao off the plane. He then said, the board meeting will take place after the war has officially ended. It will probably happen in the next few days. How many days? I'm still uncertain. The situation now is a bit complicated. Bennett lowered his voice. It's hard for the situation to move forward. Han Xiao's eyes flickered. After they headed to the meeting room, Han Xiao asked, so, what's wrong? Bennett took out the intel and explained, in summary, we already cut off all the routes from the headquarters to the outside world. The Six Nations have completely trapped the Germinal organization. However, the troops of the Six Nations are still far away from the area around the headquarters, and they have no intention of attacking. Well, since they already destroyed all the other bases, isn't it simple to just bombard the headquarters and end the war? Han Xiao replied. Well, it is possible. After losing all the side bases, the Germinal organization should not have enough anti-missile supplies and equipment to hold off the Six Nations. Even if their headquarters are hidden underground, it would still collapse under the explosion. But the reason the Six Nations didn't do so was because of another complicated issue. Bennett took out another document. Because of your intel, most of the nuclear warheads have been disabled, and the rest of the nuclear warheads have been carried back to the headquarters. Because of the limited supplies, they could not wipe out the entire army of the Six Nations. However, there are quite a number of nuclear warheads, and there would be devastating consequences to the climate of this planet if they went off. From research conducted by various meteorologists, if the nuclear warheads exploded at the same time, in the next 5 to 15 years, the radiation will drastically worsen the climate of the world, and Andrea will be the highest radioactive place on the entire planet. It will turn into a wasteland where no living beings can survive. Under moral considerations, the Six Nations must migrate the entire population of Andrea to another land. Second, during Germinal organization's retreat, they caught a lot of wanderers as hostage to prevent the Six Nations from bombarding the headquarters, Bennett sighed. That's why there's division among the Six Nations. Raylan and Theseus suggested ignoring the consequences and the lives of the hostages and directly attacking the headquarters. Then they can finally get rid of their mortal enemy once and for all. Stardragon has yet to respond. Maple wanted to force the Germinal organization to surrender, and Hesla suggested attacking the headquarters with ground troops and trying to save the hostages. As for Ordina, they used various excuses to oppose all kinds of attacks toward the Germinal organization. Han Xiao was surprised. I understand all the concerns of the other nations, but what is Ordina trying to do? They want to back off after all the fighting. Bennett knocked on the table and replied, it is the last year of the term for Ordina's leader. Their political sphere has a lot of parties, so there are a lot of competitors for his position. If they can drag the war until the next year's election, they can use the reason of national security and war to automatically get elected for the next term. Han Xiao did not know what to say. That's a ballsy move. So, which side is the Six Nations leaning toward? They want to try to make the enemy surrender. The Six Nations have their anti-missile defense system all the time, and that if the headquarters fires even one missile, they will attack and bombard the base. However, this is the worst outcome they can have. So, the Six Nations have sent a last message to the base, hoping that they will surrender and release the hostages. Then they will spare the lives of the Germinal organization. Bennett then shook his head. But until now, the Germinal organization still hasn't responded. Chapter 283, Disagreement. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. The headquarters were as dense as a black mountain range covered in dead silence. The ground was full of equipment left by the soldiers, and the pungent smell of gas and smoke filled the city. In the buildings were the hiding soldiers. The atmosphere was dead and lifeless, and all of the soldiers stared out the windows with eyes that looked lost. Even though they could not see the army of the Six Nations on the horizon, everyone knew that countless missiles were aiming right at them. The headquarters could turn into the sea of fire at any given second. No one knew where their fate would lead them. Everything would depend on the final judgment based on the Germinal organization. Maybe there was a slim chance of surrendering. In the end, not everyone embraced the idea of sacrificing for their country. In the underground command room of the headquarters, the screen displayed the situation right now. The single blue dot represented the lonely headquarters, while the red field, which represented the Six Nations, covered the entire continent. There was nowhere for them to run. The leader, who wore a mask, stood right in front of the screen with his hands behind his back. The senior officials quietly exchanged eye contact, but no one spoke. The room was dead silent. "What do you plan to do?" a senior official asked after a while. The leader shut his eyes. While everyone was worrying about the next step, the leader replied with a hoarse voice, "Launch all the nuclear missiles." Everyone was stunned by the words. A bald senior official who had a considerable amount of power shouted, "The Six Nations have already locked us down, and there's no way we can bring them down by launching the rocks. This is suicide." "So what? Do you want to beg for mercy in front of the Six Nations?" The leader's expression did not change. "Don't forget the vision of the Germinal organization. There can be no defeat. Death is the only way." All the senior officials had great hatred toward the Six Nations. However, in the face of death, not everyone could stand their ground in their belief. Moreover, from the situation, being suicidal would not achieve anything. There was a chance that the Six Nations would break their promise and kill them after they surrendered, but there was still a slim of hope that they could survive. "I disagree," the bald senior official yelled as he stepped forward. The leader turned around and glared at him and the officials behind. "Is there anyone who agrees with him?" Some officials looked right back at the leader, and some lowered their heads, but all of them replied with silence. Facing the line of life and death, the leader and the officials had a disagreement, as if there was a huge cliff that separated them. "What if I insist?" the leader said calmly. "Launching the nuclear weapons requires 2 keys, the system authorization, and your fingerprint and iris," the bald man replied. "You have the authorization, but you only have a key, while the vice leader has the other key, and he is on our side." The leader looked around and asked, "So, where is he?" "Of course he is not here. We won't give you any chance." The leader shook his head. "Looks like you made your decisions long ago. Don't be reckless. We still have the chance to bring the uprising again as a nation, so we should not simply sacrifice our lives." The bald official tried to persuade the leader, but he suddenly stopped with his eyes wide open. As he was talking, the leader had taken out 2 keys that were needed to launch the rocket, and one of them was supposed to be with the vice leader. How did you? Oh my God. Put it down now. Why is the key with you? Where's the vice leader?" No one could believe what had just happened, and the room turned into chaos. The leader held onto the keys without saying anything. "Return the key right now. We won't let you do whatever you want." The bald man tried to suppress the fear on his face. His voice shook slightly as he made a hand sign behind his back. The leader shook his head and looked at the crowd. "Meagle, you secretly had conversation with Maple. Dorios, You made some compromise with the Oradina. Nude, Raylan promised to provide protection. The leader mentioned most of the people in the room, and seeing everyone's shocked expression, he slowly said, the consequences of surrendering for you, of course, will be different from the normal soldiers. So, don't act like you are full of righteousness. Do whatever you want. The officials' expressions changed, and they felt the fear of the leader rise in their bones. Even though the leader had always been intimidating, at least, the officials could still guess what the leader was thinking. However, ever since they started losing the war, it had become harder to grasp what the leader was thinking. To be exact, it was right after Zero escaped the encirclement that the leader changed. As if he was a lake without any bottom, suffering loses after loses, the leader had remained calm like a still pond. Nothing could make him rage anymore. The door opened, and a dozen executive officers surrounded the senior officials. These executive officers were all part of their army. After the war started, there were countless injuries and casualties for the executive officers, but the officials had all had the brains to protect their own interest and power. The main ideal of the germinal organization that gathered the people was hatred, not loyalty toward a certain person. The officials did not say anything. The bald official gave the signal, and the executive officers moved forward and prepared their attacks toward the leader. Covered in colorful beams, the leader sighed. Guess I'll send you all to see the vice leader. In a land far away from the headquarters was the base of the Six Nations. Thousands of armored troops awaited their command, and jets were hovering above the ground. The sound of engines cut through the sky, and the shockwave vibrated the tents and equipment on the ground. The missile vehicles were on standby, and multiple satellites and radars closely observed any sign of the missiles in the headquarters and movements in the sky. As soon as they saw anything that was flying into the sky, they could instantly take it down. Then they would resort to violence and use everything they had to turn the headquarters into a wasteland. In the battle command center, all the representing military officials were antsy. There's only 7 hours, 32 minutes, and 11 seconds before the time limit, and they still haven't responded, the representative of Ordina said. I think that we should extend the time for the germinal organization to think carefully and not do something stupid. No one replied. Raylan officer said with a cold expression, we have already contacted 4 of the senior officials in the germinal organization. They were still trying to convince the leader. The other representatives nodded with agreement. They all did something similar. When they are pushed back against the wall, quite a number of the germinal organization senior officers were willing to surrender in exchange for safety. The obvious bargain that the Six Nations wanted was to make the germinal organization surrender and save the hostages from danger. It's already been more than an hour and 20 minutes since the last contact. They haven't reported back to us since then. Don't worry. We still have time. The officials from different nations were chit-chatting with each other while they waited for the response. Giving a choice for the germinal organization meant that they would have to wait for the result. An officer from Hesla suddenly asked, so in the end, who is the leader of germinal organization? According to the intelligence from Darknet, the leader came from the Golem, the country that had fallen. The former identity of the germinal organization was Mimok, but we searched through all the files and still couldn't find the exact identity of the leader. Bennett had given the information that Hans found to the Six Nations, thinking that they could find more details given their power. However, the search was still met with a dead end. The leader was like a ghost without a past, and the files that stacked as high as mountain did not include his name. The only information that they had was what Hans had found. Didn't Raylan conquer Gollum? Do you have any intel? Star Dragon's official asked. Raylan's official shook his head. We even searched for files on the list of civilians in Gollum back when it still existed, and none of them matched with the leader. We also sent some people to visit Gollum's original territory, and they didn't find anything. I wonder if the intel from the Darknet is true. Chapter 284, The Finale, 1. Hugh. Heavy breath filled the room like a broken bellow, and the stickiness of blood and spit crawled in his throat. The mask covered in blood fell to the floor. Leaning on the side of a table, the leader barely opened his eyes and saw the destroyed room after the fight while the floor was full of corpses. The leader was the only one left standing in the room while all the executive officers had all fallen under his fists. The senior officials' frightened expression remained on their face as if they had stopped breathing. The leader spat out bloody mucus and took a deep breath. The dense smell of stinky blood irritated his nose, and he could not help but cough his lungs out for another 2 minutes. The intense battle had provoked his hidden injury from the ambush, when he was heavily injured by Han Xiao. He had not had time to recover, and soon, he became unable to quickly resolve it. Every time that he felt the subtle pain, he was reminded of Han Xiao. Until now, the leader could only feel hatred in his heart. At times when the anger faded away, he could feel nothing but emptiness. The leader stood in front of the central control panel and selected the option to launch the nuclear bomb. He took off his gloves, scanned his fingerprints and eyes, and authorized the launch. After the two keys were in the keyhole, both of them turned just needed to be turned, then the nuclear bomb will be launched. On the last step, the hands full of scars held on the keys, but they could not turn them. The leader leaned on the chair and looked up at the ceiling. His eyes were not focused on anything, as if he was daydreaming. No one had any idea what he was thinking. Do-do-do. The window popped out on the corner of the screen, and surprisingly, it was a call from Han Xiao. The leader pressed the accept button without any hesitation. The screen then showed Han Xiao's face. Seeing the corpses on the floor, Han Xiao raised his eyebrow. He wanted to call to see the situation on the side of the Germinal organization. He also wanted to see the leader one last time, but he already understood the situation after witnessing the scene. He shook his head and said, "Looks like you have made your decision." The leader's eyes leaked his disappointment. "I still can't believe that I lost to you, you insignificant bug. Mistakes after mistakes, my life's work has been ruined by you. Now what do you want? To again gloat about what you have done? I'm here, enjoy yourself. My life, the end of Germinal organization, will all be an important part of your history. You are the winner, so you have the power to look down on the loser you defeated. I told you, the galaxy is unfathomable. This planet is just a small speck of dust, and no one will spare a thought on what's happened here." Han Xiao shook his head. Even though he was watching the fall of his enemy, Han Xiao was calm and collected. In the end, he was still a gentleman. He slowly said, "I just think that, after doing so much in your life, you still haven't had a chance to express your feelings. Do you want me to confess to you, my mortal enemy?" The leader's face looked even uglier. He leaned on the chair and relaxed his body. "That seems interesting." Han Xiao shrugged and directly cut to what he wanted. "What's with Destiny's Child?" The leader laughed out loud and stopped after a while, shaking his head. "Destiny's Child is nothing but a pity man. He can see the future, change the fate of people, yet he cannot decide his own life and death. He was destined to be used by others. You also have the ability to predict the future, so maybe the fate of Destiny's Child will be yours." Han Xiao did not correct that statement. "Talk about yourself. It seems that you are from Gollum, am I correct?" The leader's expression changed and replied, "Looks like you have already found out." "That's correct. I was once a citizen of Gollum. Back then, I was a young man with passion and rage. After the event of Mimok, I joined the rebel organization. I rioted, protested, demonstrated. All I wanted was to save my country from the rotten government. But suddenly, the war started. Raylan invaded the country, and my country shattered into pieces under internal parasites and external attacks." The leader's tone suddenly got angry. "Did you hear that? People called us parasites. What did I do wrong? Was protesting a mistake? No. All we wanted was to take back the rights that we once had and make our country a better place. We were so close to victory, and the path of light was right in front of us. Yet, the war destroyed everything. After the fall of Gollum, all my friends were executed. All of us were viewed as a defect in the society, and eliminating us was the best way. The remaining citizens of Gollum were enslaved and tortured. Only a few were able to escape, and I was one of them. I was no legend. I'm just a normal kid who was lost until I saw the border of Gollum, which was locked by Rayland. Seeing the burning flag of Gollum and the rise of Rayland's flag, I was awoken, and I realized my mission I have to carry out. Gollum was not perfect. There was darkness and weakness, but it was still my country. The only thing I could do was take revenge for my nation." The leader exhaled, and his eyes dripped off the screen. His memories slowly showed up in his mind. But in the wave of time, a normal young man was nobody, and his life was as fragile as a bug. To travel through the battlefield, I dragged my exhausted body and transferred from one refugee camp to another. I was treated like a dog, and I lived a life without any respect. However, my blood was boiling, and I kept telling myself that no matter what danger I faced, I must live on. It was hatred that kept my heart pumping, that made my legs move forward. In the end, after I succeed in passing through the battlefield, I did not stop to look for shelter but turned to the wilderness. I knew that without power, I could not seek revenge. That's why I lived in the wilderness and battled with the beasts. I turned myself into unbreakable steel. At this point, the leader pointed to the scars on his face and hand. 176 scars was the price I paid for my power. Han Xiao raised his eyebrows. So, you really are just a normal human. Why can't I be a normal man? The leader asked back. After some thought, Han Xiao nodded and hinted that the leader could continue his story. The leader then said, in the wilderness, I kept on thinking, and when I headed back to the battlefield, I heard that the Mimok organization still existed. How ironic, the tool that was created to bring terror upon the world was the only thing that represented the purest of Golem. Then a plan formed in my mind as I assassinated the leader of Mimok and changed the name to Germinal Organization. I hid and slowly developed the organization, and it was since then I wore the mask. The war created a lot of opportunities. Countless people lost their home and had nowhere to stay. Then I decided on the vision of the Germinal Organization and gave them the hope that we could create a new world. Vision thrives in people who supports an ideology. It wasn't me who used the refugees with no countries to go back to, but it was they who voluntarily gave their lives to me. This is hate, and they did not care as long as they could achieve their goal after they sacrificed their lives. Since my desire matched the public's desire, I got a lot of helpful hands. And the Germinal Organization that fed on the aftermath of battle quickly grew from a seed into a towering tree. The voice of the leader was filled with hate. After the dream that the leader had nurtured was destroyed by another man, other than angry, his feelings were confused. Then, you showed up. You cut down the tree. Chapter 285, The Finale, 2. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Compared to the pollution you caused in the past, and will cause in the future, I'd feel it's more environmentally friendly to cut down this tree of yours, Han Xiao said mockingly. In his previous life, no player could dig out the origin of the leader. It was truly hard to find the true identity of an ordinary missing person in this age of war. After Han Xiao heard the leader's description, he had a clearer understanding of him. The leader was a firm patriot, one of the few Golem citizens that escaped Raylan's invasion. He hid in the dark, purposely fighting at the edge of death to look for breakthroughs and the power to revenge, one of the superhumans that started ordinary and reached the peak of the planet, ambitious and extreme. Now that he had met a dead end, he decided that he would rather die than compromise. It was clear that the hatred was already deeply buried in his bones. The experience of a planet main character is indeed really interesting and legendary. Every main character has a history that can be dug out, Han Xiao thought with mixed feelings. When he was still very weak, the leader had been like a mountain, and he had needed to act with caution and become stronger. Finally, he had gained the power to face him head-on and defeated the Germinal Organization. The Germinal Organization was the main antagonist of Planet Aquamarine in version 1.0. Han Xiao had also participated in the storyline during his previous life as a player. Now that he had a different identity, his impact was much higher, and it was a totally different experience. Although Han Xiao looked very calm, it did not mean that he did not enjoy the victory. There was still a sense of accomplishment in his heart. The leader shook his head and said, I never thought that an escape test subject would become my greatest enemy. When you stole the secrets and broke through my ambush, I already knew that the Germinal Organization would undoubtedly lose. I never give up, but there was nothing I could do. It was barely even a struggle before death. Because he had predicted this long ago, no matter how bad the situation was for them, he was not surprised. Seeing the organization that he had built slowly slide into the abyss, he was actually still calm. To me, defeat means death. The 6 nations want to see me surrender so that they can take all the knowledge that the Germinal Organization has gained throughout the years. I won't let them get anything. Han Xiao raised his brows. About that, I heard you captured quite a few hostages. If you activate the explosion, all of them will definitely die, and the nuclear blast will affect the climate, worsening the environment of the entire planet, endangering everyone's future in this planet. Are you sure you want to do this? The leader kept silent. The sound of breathing was the only thing coming out from the speakers. Han Xiao was not in a hurry. He watched the screen calmly. After a while, the leader spoke in a low voice. "You're going to persuade me to surrender." Han Xiao shrugged and said, "I'm not planning to, because you don't seem like someone that can be persuaded, but the guys opposite me want me to." He was in a meeting room of Sanctuary 1 at the moment, holding his laptop and sitting on the sofa. Bennett sat opposite him and listened to the entire conversation. He kept using hand signs to tell Han Xiao to persuade the leader. Both sides suffering was the last thing Bennett wanted to see. Han Xiao felt that Bennett was daydreaming. To have him, the very person that caused their defeat, do the persuasion, was that not completely adding fuel to the fire? Even if the leader had planned to surrender originally, he might change his mind instantly after seeing Han Xiao's face. Luckily, the leader had always been very firm, or he would have been quite worried. Wait a minute, that logic felt somewhat weird. Bennett kept giving him signs. Han Xiao had no choice but to give it a try, or Bennett would nag him like a mother again. "I'd rather bring everyone with me," the leader said maliciously. "This world shall know pain." Han Xiao's mouth opened wide, a classic reference stuck in his throat. "Pain, is that you?" 1. Pain is a character in a Japanese manga/anime series. One of his signature lines is "This world shall know pain." The leader sneered. "I hate this world, why should I care for it? Even if the Six Nations won, don't even dream of not paying anything. The Six Nations are killers, too, only reaching their position today after destroying countless nations. They stood on the ruins and praised their actions. The winner is always on the side of justice, and these blood debts will all be buried in history. No one will know, no one will find out, and no one will fight for justice of the old era. These governments that have luckily survived have enjoyed themselves for too long, and it's time for them to pay a little interest." The leader did not care about what the world would become after he died. He would rather betray others than to be betrayed. Even a normal person might feel this way, not to mention the malicious, ambitious leader. Han Xiao did not comment. The results of a nuclear attack would have a minimal effect on him, as he would sooner or later leave planet Aquamarine. Furthermore, the next version was mutation disaster. A larger disaster was coming, and in comparison, this climate disaster would be nothing. The germinal organization had survived in his previous life, and there had been a potential risk of them coming back again. Now the germinal organization had been annihilated at once, but it brought a lasting negative impact. As for which one was better, Han Xiao did not really know, but the latter would definitely clear his fall of the germinal mission. To other people of planet Aquamarine that did not know this, the result of the latter was horrifying. The climate was deeply connected to their lives, and no one would wish for an environment deterioration. Sitting opposite, Bennett was anxious. He wished he could just fly to the germinal organization headquarters and kill the leader before he could press the button. Han Xiao looked at the clock and said slowly, "There's still quite some time till the deadline that the Six Nations gave. Aren't you going to wait any longer? I prefer to decide my time of death myself." The leader's eyes became firm. He reached out his hand, held onto the nuclear launch keys, and started turning slowly. A suffocating pressure came out of the screen, and the leader's movement seemed to be lasting forever. Bennett's hands clawed at the sofa's armrests and tore the leather open. Every degree he turned, 1 second was taken away from the countdown clock of countless lives. The second hand gradually pointed toward the final result. Han Xiao looked at the leader's face calmly and suddenly asked, "I never got your name." "My name." The leader lifted the corner of his lips and gave a ferocious smile. "Not important." "You're right, so, goodbye then." Han Xiao sighed and waved his hand. The keys turned 180 degrees. The sound of a quake came out of the screen that was the sound of missiles rising into the sky. The leader retracted his hands and sat on the chair like a statue. At that moment, his tone did not have any hatred, regret, or sadness of almost facing his death. There was not any intense emotion. Like old neighbors passing each other, he nodded at Han Xiao. "Goodbye." Warning. Warning. Fast-moving objects are rising from the germinal organization headquarters. All of the waiting military officers in the Six Nations Combat Conference stood up in shock. This was the worst-case scenario. Although the people present were mentally prepared, when this moment arrived, they still found it hard to accept. A nuclear blast killing hostages, resulting in pollution, burning the germinal organization headquarters to the ground, countless classified technology lost forever. It could not be considered a win for any party. Activate anti-navigation, the assistant said, shivering. All the officers had no choice. Without hesitation, their responses were the same. Activate immediately. In the Germinal Organization headquarters, the ground and the buildings were trembling slightly. The hiding Germinal Organization soldiers looked up to the sky through the windows and saw the missiles rise one after another. An atmosphere of silence and death spread among the people. Everyone knew the leader's decision and what was going to happen next. Tears, despair, madness, twitching, trembling, screaming, growling, indifference. The countless emotions and responses right before death. In the sky far away, a dense number of black objects approached rapidly. Some clashed with the rising missiles, and some landed in the headquarters. Hum. The first sound was a high-pitched explosion undetectable to the human ear. Most of the people in the Six Nations camp far away covered their ears, but blood was still flowing out. A fire pillar, tens of kilometers in diameter, shot up the sky. The group of bases disintegrated in an instant. Black dust was spat out from the blinding firelight, gradually rising and turning into a condensed black mushroom. In the Six Nation camp far away, the people who looked out could only see white. The light had temporarily blinded most of the people, and even the superhumans had to close their eyes. No one could stay natural in the face of this kind of power. Everyone felt small and insignificant, like they had become sand that was going to be blown away by the next wind. Unable to control their own fate, they started to shiver uncontrollably. Even in further areas, the fire could be seen to soar through the clouds above the Germinal Organization on the horizon, and the clouds formed a circle in the sky. Right after, the firelight shone a second time, emitting a yellow spherical shockwave mixed with dust and ash. Everywhere it passed, the ground cracked, and the buildings shattered into pieces. Countless bent pieces of metal easily flew for miles like feathers, falling onto the wilderness like rain. The shockwave finally arrived at the camp. Like the breath of the god of wind, tents were blown away, spinning like dandelion seeds. Heavy vehicles rolled like balls. For the people there, a few broken bones was just a light injury. The onlooking players were shocked and excited. They recorded the moment and did not want to miss out anything. With the expanding shockwave came the second explosion, and the frequency could be caught by human ear this time, almost breaking people's eardrums. Boom. The sound was like the sky was falling apart. Deafening. The camps behind started to stand their ground and commanded the troops to retreat quickly. The continuous firelight was the only thing left on the wilderness. The image was like a punishment from the gods, and the tumbling mushroom cloud kept changing its shape like the smile of a devil. The leader, with his unfulfilled belief and the organization that he had created, turned into a bright firework that lit up the entire sky. The Germinal Organization had ended. The nuclear explosion that burned the headquarters to the ground marked the end of the Planet Aquamarine War. The highest-ranked officials of the Six Nations hosted an emergency meeting. The enemy had been defeated, but the upcoming impact was not optimistic. In accordance to the scale of the explosion, the Climate Bureau created a calculus model. The first batch of radiation dust will enter the atmospheric cycle in the next 3 to 6 hours. Within the next month, the land of Andrea will enter a nuclear winter that will last for at least half a year. During that time, the land will not be suitable for any life form. Flora and fauna will die in droves, and the land will become a complete death zone. The radiation will reach the sea area near Andrea, which might cause the marine food chain to collapse. Some sea creatures might also go through unknown mutations. High-density radiation and pollution will enter the sea cycle, then spread to the entire world through the form of rain. This process will take about 300 to 500 days to complete. By then, the entire planet's climate will start to deteriorate. As the affected area is much larger, the deterioration is not as severe as it will be in Andrea, but it still will heavily damage the atmosphere and have a negative impact in every way. This impact might last as long as more than 10 years. In this time, the entire planet's technology is estimated to be unable to advance and might even recede. The high-ranked officials of the Six Nations all had serious expressions. This was not just about a nation, it was about the entire world, the entire race. An anti-war official slammed the table and said wrathfully, "Look. Look what you did. Our troops suffered huge losses. Not only do we not get any benefits after winning, it even led to this result. We never should have started the expedition and the war in the first place. We should have let the Germinal Organization hide in Andrea and stopped after we destroyed their sub-bases." Back then, when the expedition was decided, some politicians had been anti-war, because once the war started, the resources and authority would heavily slant to the military. Of course, some high-ranked officials would not be happy about it. However, majority ruled, and their voice was ignored. Now that they had justified excuses, they decided to stand up for themselves after what had already happened. We are already at this point, don't say any more useless things. The bitter fruit of war had to be borne by the entire world, it affected a lot of innocents. In order to get rid of this enemy, they had paid such a big price. Some high-ranked officials started to ask themselves if this was all worth it. The answer was yes. At least in the eyes of the high-ranked officials, such a strong enemy posed more of a threat than what they called a planet-scale climate disaster. After they got rid of that, only then could they feel safe and have the condition to grow steadily. The high-ranked officials of the nations all thought that everyone had to face the climate disaster threat, everyone had to deal with it, so they were still on the same starting line, and it was fair for everyone. At least the result could still be saved. Should we lock down the news and not share it with the civilians? Too many people already know about it. There's no need for that. Announce it officially. The people will definitely protest and blame us for causing this. Not important, the war has ended. What we need to face now is the disaster that will come after that. Let everyone know we're on the same boat, and they should let go of the past and not dwell on what was wrong or who was right. We have to work together to get through this. Then, what about? The high-ranked officials of the nations discussed one suggestion after another. With a furious expression, Bennett walked back and forth in the room, mumbling to himself. Han Xiao sat on the sofa with his legs crossed. He looked up the blue sky outside the window and shook his head. The leader had turned to ash with the headquarters. The Germinal organization could be considered as the first big boss that he had faced, and this big main storyline on planet Aquamarine had been destroyed by him. He started to like this feeling a little. No matter how legendary the leader's past was, he had been Han Xiao's enemy. Han Xiao very rarely showed mercy to his enemies. Victory meant victory, and there was no need for the winner to fake regret and remorse. With a deep breath, Han Xiao got excited. He opened the interface and browsed the notifications that had shown up. You have received Planet Legendary Points Germinal Organization Slayer. Grade a main storyline mission Fall of the Germinal completed. Grade, Unbelievable. You have received mission reward for Unbelievable grade. Calculating reward. Calculating reward. Please wait patiently. Chapter 286, Dungeon Creation. Han Xiao's eyes sparkled. In the past, the highest mission grading that he had received was excellent, and unbelievable was better than excellent. For normal players, the normal mission process should be like this: infiltrate one sub-base after another to uncover the location of the other bases through the stolen information. As the Germinal organization became more cautious, the player would face stronger enemies, and the mission would become increasingly cumbersome. Every time the player got the intelligence about the next base, they would face the choice of destroying the base themselves or borrowing power from the 6 nations. The former would reward higher process. Han Xiao had skipped the most cumbersome part of collecting intelligence and instantly given out all the Germinal organization bases' locations. The difference in efficiency was like the difference between using a sickle and a tractor. Fall of the Germinal was a grade A main storyline mission, and even Han Xiao had spent more than 1 year to complete it with his prior knowledge. Han Xiao was satisfied with the result that he had almost completed the final target of the entire large main storyline by himself. He was anticipating the reward. Planet Legendary Points, Planet Aquamarine Germinal Organization Slayer. The Germinal Organization, planet-sized large organization, the enemy of the 6 nations for many years, its power is like a majestic mountain. You are just a tiny trader, but you gradually uprooted the Germinal organization and buried it. The Germinal organization became your stepping stone, and your actions will be passed on and admired by countless people. Your name will be written in the books of history on this planet. New legendary points. This was a reward that he had expected. His single mission EXP reward quota increased by another 5%, and his daily quota increased by 100%. Very soon, the other reward showed on the interface. Fall of the Germinal. Personal destruction percentage, 48.72%. Grade, Unbelievable. You have received 4,870,000 EXP. Plus 2 potential points. Plus 4 free attribute points. Plus 800 relationship points with all 6 nations. His personal destruction percentage was close to half, which meant that in the operation of destroying the germinal organization, Han Xiao almost did as much as the entire military forces of the Six Nations. After all, Six Nations' many operations had been carried out with the support of the intelligence he provided. One could say that his intelligence had controlled the entire war. Using the hostility of the Six Nations toward germinal organization, he just had to give the Six Nations a knife, and they would attack. Even if the Six Nations knew that Han Xiao intended to use them, they were willing to be used. The end result was that both Han Xiao and the Six Nations achieved their own goal. You have received reward for unbelievable grade. Bonus 120% EXP, 5,830,000. Random reward *1. Special item *5. In accordance with my mission evaluation, the hidden percentage for receiving something good as the random reward should be quite high. The random reward could be an item, ability, or something else. It only had a chance of appearing when the mission grade evaluation was very high. Leaving the random reward aside, he first looked at what were the 5 special items. You have received character summon card, Germinal Organization Leader. You have received character summon card, Destiny's Child. You have received character summon card, Aurora. You have received character summon card, Hyla. You have received Medal of Honor Germinal Organization Slayer, A. Han Xiao was stunned. This was the first time that he had received this many character summon cards at once. The use of the character summon card was to give the user the ability of the character summon temporarily. It was a consumption item, and if used well, it could change the situation in an instant. He had only received 2 before. The leader, Destiny's Child, Aurora, and Hyla. All of the abilities of these 4 people are quite good, and all of them can be used more than 4 times, very durable. Character summon card, Germinal Organization Leader. Armor penetrating consecutive attacks. For 8 seconds, all attack will be considered armor penetrating critical hits, reducing the defense of targets hit by 24%. Duration, 5 minutes. Usages, 0/12. Character summon card, Destiny's Child. Foresight. Predict an opportunity in the future. Can indicate to be a mission, an item, action of a certain person, etc. Usages, 0/5. Character summon card, Aurora Life Return. Restore back to full status instantly. Usages, 0/6. Character summon card, Hyla Whisper of the Dead. Deals psychic damage 3 times to the enemy. The damage is based on the user's int or mice, can be indicated. Decrease all statuses of the target by 15%. Duration, 3 hours. Usages, 0/8. Only the effect of Destiny's Child was not very clear. The rest were all simple, straightforward, and practical. Predict an opportunity, this is quite ambiguous. Could it be predicting opportunities of completing a mission or getting a certain item? Han Xiao had a flash of insight. He was thinking of leaving planet Aquamarine, but all the methods that he could think of were not very reliable. He could just nice try the effect of the Destiny's Child card. Without any further hesitation, Han Xiao used it, with thoughts of going into the galaxy in his mind. His vision suddenly blurred, and like fog, it was all white. Unaware of how much time had passed, a tint of black appeared in the middle of his vision, then it became an eerie image. The background seemed to be a wasteland, and a flame fell from the sky, creating a circular crater, giving out black smoke and electrical sparkle. Some unknown information flashed in his mind. The location is. The time is. The image suddenly stopped, as if everything was just an illusion. Han Xiao regained his focus. The information was in his mind, and his expression changed a little. It really did predict an opportunity to head out into the galaxy. This opportunity was originally already one method I had thought of but didn't know when it would happen. This card broke through the fog of fate and predicted a location and time estimate. The effect of this card was very surprising, and he now had more confidence in leaving planet Aquamarine. He looked at the last item, Medal of Honor Germinal Organization Slayer, A. When completing a high difficulty main storyline mission with a high evaluation grade, one would receive this type of medal. Its effect provided a 3% boost to all attributes, and after collecting 3, it could be exchanged into a special achievement medal, providing a 12% boost to all attributes. He had farmed it in his previous life before. Knowing its effect was very good, he equipped it on the spot. After he arranged the special items, he started to select random the reward. Randomizing. Your reward time this time is, an item. Please select one from the 3 items below. Race change card, change into a random race. Mission completion card *3, consider one mission to be completed and receive the reward based on the lowest grade. Esper ability potential enhancing fluid, increase the potential of Esper ability. This is good. Han Xiao's eyes glimmered. Esper ability potential enhancing fluid was extremely rare. Espers were willing to use everything they had to buy this thing because there were only 2 ways to increase one's Esper ability potential. One was through rare experiments and drugs in-game, and the other was Esper ability potential enhancing fluid. The other 2 items were not suitable for Han Xiao, so he chose the Esper ability potential enhancing fluid and left in on the interface without collecting it. Esper ability potential enhancing fluid, it has a very huge potential value regardless of whether I sell it to players or others. I need to keep stock up on the good items like this, it will definitely be of great use in the future. The reward this time was colossal. He had earned 10 million EXP in one shot, and although it did not look a lot, that was because Han Xiao's standard was too high. If a player received 10 million EXP in one shot, it would be an outrageous amount in version 1.0. There were also potential points, free attribute points, and rather useful items. Han Xiao was quite satisfied. The most valuable ones were those items. However, Han Xiao kept feeling like there should be more rewards. Thus, thinking that, he opened the NPC panel. Suddenly, he noticed a new option under the quota. Dungeon creation, 6 nations and germinal organization. What's this? Han Xiao was confused. This new function did not even have any notification. He tried to use this function, and the notification showed up. Please select a part of the main storyline to create a dungeon crystal. Create a dungeon crystal. Han Xiao's expression changed into surprise. After some testing, he became familiar with the use of this function. To put it simply, it could turn parts of his experience in the germinal organization main storyline into a dungeon. Then he could create the dungeon crystal and use that as a reward for the missions that he gave out. It increased the variety of rewards for his missions. Han Xiao guessed that the reason this new function appeared should be because he had completed a high difficulty large main storyline with a very high grade, which meant that he had done something legendary. Due to that, he could turn the things that he had done into dungeons. Some missions from some NPCs might reward dungeon crystals, such as Dion, whom he had met before. Now he could do so as well, and because of the interface, he could control the creation of dungeon crystals. He realized that the dungeon crystals could only be rewarded as part of a mission reward. It could not be turned into an item and sold in his shop, which fitted the method of players acquiring dungeon crystals. Compared to other rewards, this function was the biggest reward, strengthening his functions as an NPC and becoming more attractive to the players. Han Xiao was astonished. Dungeons can only be created from legendary experiences, such as largely changing the main storyline of a planet or even larger areas. There might be many more functions to the NPC panel, I just have to acquire them. With the NPC panel, it meant that there were more benefits to taking part in the main storyline. If he could possess the dungeon creation right to many huge events, the players would be unbelievably interested in him. This was the biggest pleasant surprise. Chapter 287, Stable Period in Planet Aquamarine. After Han Xiao finished arranging the rewards, Bennett, who was walking back and forth, sat down, too. A war of this scale will not happen again anytime soon, but when the 6 nations recover, they might start to clear out other organizations to strengthen their dominance. Now that the germinal organization has been defeated, Darknet is one of the biggest organizations left, so they will come for us sooner or later. Han Xiao put away his excitement and put on a pondering face. Before having authority, anyone would think themselves a good person. The 6 nations still need to deal with the upcoming disasters brought by the nuclear blast, and they won't have time for other things for a short period. Talking about the disaster, your sanctuary plan can now be put to use. I'd rather it never be, Bennett sighed. After the war, more wanderers will look for protection, so I plan to speed the plan up, build sanctuaries in Western continent and Northern continent as well. The refugees of Andria need to be migrated, so I will send people to fetch them. The 6 nations are very willing to throw this matter to us. There were 2 large main storylines on planet Aquamarine. One of them was the germinal organization, which he already destroyed, and this was the main storyline of conflict. The other was the construction of sanctuaries. Compared to the Germinal Organization War, the Sanctuary main storyline would not be so intense. The whole of planet Aquamarine would become stable. Next. There would most likely not be any more large conflicts in version 1.0. Han Xiao's strength was at the peak of the planet, and he was responsible for the end of the Germinal Organization. Therefore, he basically did not have any enemies and could steadily grow. The Germinal Organization main storyline was supposed to be a large event that would happen throughout the version 1.0, but now, it had ended in the early stages. Players that preferred the chaos, of course, would not like this piece, but this was a good thing for Han Xiao since he had just received the dungeon creation right for the Germinal Organization main storyline. He could divide the war into dungeons and fulfill the players' everlasting desire for battle. More players would be attracted to him, and his position would continue to grow. The Germinal Organization is dead, and I have no enemies in planet Aquamarine anymore. I can now prepare for the galaxy peacefully. The opportunity to leave planet Aquamarine is around the Pro League, in about 1 year. This period will be very peaceful, so I need to get more EXP while I can, as there will not be many players in the galaxy for me to interact with. The enemy was gone, and Han Xiao suddenly felt like he was finally relieved. Version 1.0 would last for about 3.5 years. He could totally wait for more than a year. The 6 nations were enjoying the victory at the moment, not knowing that a disaster would soon arrive. The nuclear blast might strengthen the power of the mutation disaster, and if so, Han Xiao could only mourn for them. In the next few days, Han Xiao joined the Darknet high-rank meetings to discuss the future. Most of the time, he was just watching and hardly gave any suggestions, but everyone in the meeting took him very seriously. As the strongest person in the Darknet, the mastermind behind the fall of Germinal Organization, Han Xiao's name and position were above all others. With his achievements, Han Xiao would receive the same treatment anywhere he went. In the player forums, the ending of this large main storyline attracted a lot of attention. It was the first time for the players to take part in something of such a large scale, so they were very excited. There were some players who saw the nuclear explosion with their own eyes and uploaded the recording. And the cause of all this, Han Xiao, had his share of the attention, too. The players made guesses on Han Xiao's experiences and increased Han Xiao's fame once again. With the end of the war, Germinal Organization players lost their organization and had a chance to choose again. They left Andrea together with the refugees and could choose which continent to go to. Without any prior agreement, almost 70% of the ex-Germinal Organization players chose to go to the southern continent. Black Phantom, we are coming. The ex-Germinal Organization player almost cried tears of joy. After having a tough time for so long, they finally saw the light. Who could understand how bitter they felt when they saw the other players show off the benefits from Han Xiao? Why not all ex-Germinal Organization players? Of the other 30%, most of them had participated in the Germinal Organization headquarters mission, so their relationship points with Han Xiao were less than -10. Piece of *T Germinal Organization, give me back my future. The plane landed in Sanctuary 3. Just as Han Xiao alighted from the plane, Huang Yu approached him like he had something to say. What is it? Han Xiao noticed Huang Yu's hesitation. Huang Yu cleared his throat and said, Your Excellency, your family member is here to visit you. My family? Han Xiao was stunned for a while, then he realized it was the Alumera family. With some thinking, after the war ended, he was someone outside Alumera but a member of Alumera, and he was also the person with the highest position in the entire planet. Of course, Alumera would be curious of his standpoint, and they wanted to rely on him by using this relationship that they had. Han Xiao raised his eyebrows and said, Tell him to come and see me. 10 minutes later, Xiao Quan followed Huang Yu into the guest hall. He was the messenger sent by Alumera to visit Han Xiao and one of Xiao Jin's foster children. Technically, he was Han Xiao's body's brother. They were so-called family. Xiao Quan was excellent compared to the other foster kids, and he had been chosen as the messenger this time because he knew how to read the situation. When Han Xiao's true identity was exposed, many brothers and sisters in the family could not believe it. Some had even been furious upon realizing that Han Xiao became their elder. However, Xiao Quan did not dare to have that kind of emotion. He was very aware of the current situation. They could not look at Han Xiao the way they used to, and seeing how furious his siblings were, Xiao Quan only felt they did not know what death was. Black Phantom alone was far superior to the entire Alumera, and he did not dare show any disrespect. Xiao Quan used his eloquence to chat with Huang Yu, wanting to get hints from Huang Yu about Han Xiao's standpoint but was completely unable to. As Huang Yu did not care much about him, Xiao Quan became even more nervous. "We're here, go in." The door of the guest hall opened, and Xiao Quan saw Han Xiao sitting on the sofa with crossed legs right away, staring at him faintly. Xiao Quan could not help but hold his breath. "Xiao Han Xiao, it's been a long time." Xiao Quan braced himself and greeted him, wanting to ease the atmosphere. "Call me Han Xiao," Han Xiao said coldly. That was not a good sign. Xiao Quan was terrified but had to follow. "Only you?" Han Xiao raised his brows and said, "What does Alumra want me for?" Xiao Quan found the words carefully and said, "Han Xiao, father has always been thinking of you. He has been wanting to see you and hopes you can return. As for all the unhappiness before, he can explain." Han Xiao kept silent and stared at Xiao Quan unwaveringly. Xiao Quan felt the pressure from Han Xiao's eyes and looked down, beads of sweat rolling down his forehead. "He wants me to go over there." Han Xiao stood up and walked up to Xiao Quan with wide strides as if he was going to strike. Xiao Quan was completely suppressed by the aura. Thinking of the things that Han Xiao had done, a sense of horror filled his heart. He stepped back and bumped into the chair, lost his balance, and fell to the ground. He hastily wanted to stand up, but a shadow suddenly shrouded him. Han Xiao looked down on him with his hands in his pocket. Han Xiao's eyes were like needles that made Xiao Quan tremble. He half kneeled on the ground, looked up horrified, and did not dare to move. "You guys can't seem to understand the situation. If Xiao Jin wants to see me, he'd better get over here himself," Han Xiao said coldly as he suddenly reached out his hands towards Xiao Quan. "I'm done for, he wants to kill me." Xiao Quan's face was completely terrified, his brain went blank. Suddenly, he felt a force on his shoulder from a hand, pulling him up. Xiao Quan was pulled up, and Han Xiao patted his shoulder lightly like he was brushing off dust for him. "Tell them what I said the exact way I said it." Huang Yu, who waited by the side, opened the door, pointed with his arms, and said expressionlessly, "This way please." Xiao Quan regained his focus. He did not dare stay any longer and left like he was running away. Han Xiao sat back on the sofa and pondered. "Alumra visited because they want my help using the family relationship, but I just have the right thing I need them to do. If I can get Alumra to move to Sanctuary 3, the NPC resources here will be even greater." On the other side, after Xiao Quan left, he reported the situation to Xiao Jin while shivering. He wants you to come here yourself." Xiao Jin's expression kept changing, and he let out a long sigh. "Prepare to pay the price." Back then Han Xiao wore a mask, they did not know his real identity. There had still been space to negotiate. Now that his real identity was exposed, it meant that every problem between them was placed on the table and had to be solved, and Alumra was the weaker one, so they had to keep stepping back. Xiao Jin looked at Xiao Hai, who was beside him, and said in a low voice, "Prepare to apologize and make up yourself." Xiao Jin then slammed the door on the way out, leaving Xiao Hai alone in the room with a terrified face. Chapter 288, The New Round of Business, 1. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. After getting rid of the Alumra messenger, Han Xiao went to look for Frenzied Sword and the others. He was going to test the dungeon creation function. Han Xiao went to the building next door, and none of them were home. Han Xiao scratched his head. He took out his laptop, ran a program and searched through the images of all the hidden surveillance cameras in the sanctuary to find a match for these 4 faces. Not long after, the locations of these 4 were found. Maple Moon was learning new fusion recipes with emerald grass. Green smoke was billowing out of the drugs. A few honest players stood to the side, probably there to test the drug. Hao Tian was in the arena doing a challenge. As a pro player, he had very high expectations for himself, and he never stopped honing his skills. Frenzied Sword was getting beaten rapidly by Hyla like a sandbag. Hyla had taken Han Xiao's advance and found an inhuman to train and develop her power. Aurora sat in her wheelchair and watched while hugging Bear Cub, and Bun Hit Dog was recording excitedly. Bun Hit Dog was closer to Frenzied Sword. He felt very happy, seeing that Frenzied Sword was getting beaten brutally, true friendship. Han Xiao headed to Hyla's house and called the others on the way. Just as he entered the yard, a black shadow flew away above his head. It was Frenzied Sword, and without thinking, Han Xiao pulled him down from the sky. Hyla stopped her training, her floating red hair dropping down and going back to curly hair that extended to her waist, and the red light in her eyes faded away. Han Xiao looked at Frenzied Sword, who looked miserable, then nodded in his heart. The Hyla now resembled who she was in his previous life much more. Bear Cub struggled to stand on Aurora's lap, fell onto the ground, and then ran to Han Xiao. The cub climbed up his leg, hugging on Han Xiao's neck and swung like a backpack. Bear Cub was very well taken care of, and its weight had almost doubled. Han Xiao raised his hand and slapped Bear Cub away, then looked at the combat information on the interface. Bear Cub was LV-18, 4 levels higher than when he had brought it back. Sharp claw ice bear species, rather good growth potential. Hyla felt complicated. She was full of hatred toward Germinal organization, but she had never thought that such a big organization would ever be destroyed completely. Her hatred and grudges disappeared with that ground-shaking explosion. She remembered when she had first met Han Xiao, who knew that weak, pale-faced test subject would have such legendary achievements after just 1 year. Seeing her expression was abnormal, Han Xiao took out his laptop, opened a few photos, and passed it to Hyla. The photos were the ruins of the Germinal organization headquarters after the nuclear explosion, captured by 6 nations' drones. It was black and scorched earth. After an explosion like this, they're most likely all dead. Even if there is anyone left, it will only be those of insignificance, so don't have to worry about Germinal organization coming back unless they are tired of being alive. Han Xiao paused before saying, "You were once a member of the Germinal organization, so you are on 6 nations wanted list too, but you are on my side now, so 6 nations won't be against you anymore." Hyla frowned. "I never agreed to be your subordinate." Aurora raised her hand and said, "I want to be." Hyla reached out her hands bitterly and messed Aurora's hair. Aurora's golden hair had grown longer, reaching her ears. They chatted for a while till Hao Tian and Maple Moon arrived. Usually, Han Xiao would only summon them if something good was going to happen, so they were looking forward to it. Han Xiao used the dungeon creation function. After some contemplation, he selected the Dark Crow Valley operation. To create dungeon crystals, this was suitable for the standard of the players at the moment. LV-30 Dungeon Crystal Dark Crow Valley Operation. Introduction: Dark Crow Valley is one of the Germinal organization's bases in the southern continent, destroyed by Stardragon and Hesla. This will be your test. Dungeon type: backward time travel dungeon. Player completion count: 0. Highest dungeon completion rate: none. Record holders: none. Dungeon crystal. The 4 of them exchanged looks. The average level of the player at the moment was 30, so they were starting to come into contact with dungeons. There had already been 11 fixed dungeons found on planet Aquamarine, which meant that these dungeon crystals could be earned multiple times from a character by repeating the mission. They mostly came from the various organizations, and they were all small 5-man dungeon. New dungeons meant new opportunities. The 4 of them completed the mission and received the reward. A white rhombus crystal appeared in their hands, and they could enter the dungeon by shattering it. "This is a 5-man dungeon, so we need 1 more person," Frenzied Sword immediately said. "Let's see if we can at least complete it with normal grade." Because of Han Xiao, they always stuck together, so they were very familiar with each other. Hao Tian nodded. "Okay, I'll ask Rebels shall rule from Team 1 of Sky Territory." Nobody had any objections. The 4 of them came to the square, and after waiting for a while, Rebels shall rule ran there full of joy. God Hao Tian was his idol, so he was very happy that he could just be with his idol. The 5 of them formed a team. "Let's enter the dungeon and take a look." Frenzied Sword shattered the crystal. Fog gushed out, covered the 5 of them, and disappeared from the crowded square. Their vision blurred, and when it recovered, the surroundings had become a forest. It was night, and it was difficult to even see their own hands. Backward time travel dungeon let the players participate in an event that had happened before by duplicating that event. The notification showed on their interfaces. "You are soldiers of the Dark Crow Valley base. Hesla and Stardragon troops are going to invade. Your mission is to protect the Dark Crow Valley base as best you can. Dungeon start countdown, 10 minutes. Dungeon goal: survive until the end of the event. Reward: 15,000 EXP. Optional mission I: kill 5 Stardragon or Hesla agents. Reward: 30,000 EXP. Optional mission 2: Protect the real intel in the base from leaking. Reward, 45,000 EXP. Optional Mission 3, Pankuang and GG survive. Reward, 70,000 EXP. Optional Mission 4, Defeat Stardragon and Hesla Alliance. Reward, 110,000 EXP. Dungeon Failure Conditions, Annihilation. Such high rewards. Rebels Shall Rule was shocked. As a very important member of the guild, he had seen a lot and knew a lot. The LV30 dungeons that the players had seen at the moment usually only had 2 to 3 missions, and the total reward was 70,000 to 80,000 EXP. Yet, there were 5 missions in this dungeon with so many rewards. Rebels Shall Rule then thought about it, and his face turned serious. However, the higher the reward, the more difficult it will be. The other 4 exchanged looks in confusion. Is that so? Never felt any part of the missions from Black Phantom were difficult. We are different, Bun Hit Dog said with a heavy heart. He did not have the heart to correct Rebels Shall Rule. Frenzied Sword looked at the notification and said with surprise, the dungeon will only start in 10 minutes, but we can already move freely. What does this mean? This the first time that they had met a dungeon with a countdown, so they were a little lost. Actually, the countdown would only appear in more difficult dungeons. The players would enter the event sometime before it happened so that they could do some preparation. The time for the start of the mission was the night when Hesla agents were going to steal the intelligence, so the players had the opportunity to prevent that. If they successfully did and changed the beginning of the story, the difficulty of the entire dungeon would drop from hell to difficult. However, the interface did not notify them about this, the players had to explore this themselves. In the future, when Han Xiao opened this dungeon, after the players in the sanctuary got tortured by it a few hundred times, only then would they find the correct way to start the dungeon. Of course, at the moment, the 5 of them were unaware of the importance of those 10 minutes, they started the dungeon as usual. However, this was their first time in this dungeon. This type of dungeon was different from those that were just about killing monsters, it was more realistic and more difficult. The 5 of them had fun in agony, going around and around like headless chickens. They could only follow the job given by the base and patrol. One day passed this way. During their patrol on the second night, Bun Hit Dog suddenly received a headshot. Your teammate Bun Hit Dog has died. What? The rest 4 of them were horrified. They looked in all directions immediately, but the forest was dense. The night was dark, and they had no idea where the enemy was. Bang. This time, it was Hao Tian who took a headshot. The rest of the 3 felt like the enemy was everywhere, and they were understandably anxious. Hao Tian's voice appeared in the team channel. He said very seriously, the interface said I received a lethal attack. The person that killed me was Black Phantom. They were dazed. It turned out this was a dungeon with Han Xiao in it. And as the enemy, they were very discouraged. Han Xiao's dungeon creation function was to cut out an event that would be generated into a mission. The characters in the dungeon were all mirror images, replaying events exactly as they had happened. It had nothing to do with the original person, and they had a certain amount of dungeon enhancement. After 3 consecutive shots, all 3 of them died. Their visions blurred again, and they were back in the square. They had spent 1 day in the dungeon, but only 10 minutes had passed in the outside world, the flow of time in the dungeon was different. Dungeon Dark Crow Valley operation failed. Dungeon cooldown, 3 hours. The 5 of them all smiled bitterly. This was way too difficult. They did not even know how they died. On the other side, Han Xiao saw the return of the 5 of them from his surveillance image, confirmed the dungeon crystal to be effective, and started pondering. Dungeon crystals can only be distributed through mission rewards and can't be sold for money. Its use to me is to gather more players and give them more benefit, so the players will be more willing to do things for me. Also, the players will know about my experience through the dungeon, which will in turn increase my position. These are all rather indirect benefits. I can't sell the dungeon crystals, so there's no direct benefit. Han Xiao suddenly paused. He slapped his head and laughed. I'm thinking about this the wrong way. There's no need to sell them. Chapter 289, The New Round of Business, 2. The next day, Han Xiao officially started to distribute dungeon missions. The players in the sanctuary were pleasantly surprised. Never thought Black Phantom would have dungeon missions as well. Why didn't they appear before? The Germinal organization main storyline only ended recently. Maybe it's to let those of us who didn't participate in it take part through the form of a dungeon, and Han Xiao is the one to give access to those dungeons. That's pretty good if that's the case. The players in the sanctuary had not taken part in the war main storyline. There were definitely some regrets. Now that Han Xiao had released a dungeon that was related to the completed main storyline, it was undoubtedly a chance to fulfill those regrets. The players swarmed in, but Han Xiao did not give it out for free this time. He set a mission with 1 dungeon crystal as the reward. It required something called contribution points. After accepting this mission, purchasing anything from Han Xiao would increase the contribution points. Since dungeon crystals could not be sold or generate direct benefits, he just had to change his method. He could randomly set the mission requirement, so he made the dungeon crystal into something like a bonus reward to encourage the players to buy things from him, which would, in turn, increase his sales. The players that were already planning to spend would be even more willing to spend after seeing they could complete the dungeon mission on the way. The players who wanted to complete the dungeon mission would come and buy from him, then realize that the things he sold were all bargains, and they would fall into the trap, forming a cycle. This was a promotion method. The effect was very clear. The first time Han Xiao tried it, his sales for that day increased by 30%. The results were very great. The most obvious impact was that Han Xiao's surrounding area became more crowded than subways, such that he could hardly move. After getting the dungeon crystal, the players called their friends and created teams to enter the dungeon. Their experience of the process was basically enter joyfully, die, then come out stunned and confused. The winning goal was to survive till the end. At the start, everyone died before they could reach the end. 2 days later, someone finally completed the dungeon, but the completion rate was pathetic. They completed 0 optional missions and completed the dungeon with the lowest completion rate. The 4 optional missions were the ones with the highest rewards. They spent money at Han Xiao's to receive the dungeon crystal, but they only got the lowest dungeon reward. It was a loss, and the players were frustrated. The difference in difficulty between the optional missions and the completion goal was huge. Is this dungeon even playable? Black Phantom killed me for the 8th time. My heart is exhausted. The players could not help but complain, share the dungeon's intelligence and recording, and hope someone could come up with something. After dying so many times, I can conclude, if you listen to the base's order, you'll die. How do we even complete the optional missions? Is this really an LV30 dungeon? A high-skill player arranged the intelligence and analyzed the dungeon storyline from the 5 optional missions. The outline of the path should be like this. First night into the dungeon, Hesla agents cause the leak of the base's fake intelligence. The second night, Black Phantom starts to act by sniping patrols, infiltrates the base with unknown methods, then steals the real intelligence. This night is the key to completing mission 2. Then the base enters alert, discovering Black Phantom's location. The pursuit then starts, resulting in failure. Right after that, a large number of Hesla troops arrive, and the head-on battle starts. There's a chance to complete mission 1 here. Then, everyone gets surrounded and defends the base, and in the end, the base explodes. Staying alive till this point will be considered completing the dungeon. Tables and recordings were listed there, showing the things to take note of in every step of the dungeon storyline, then it went on to the next topic. Obviously, in this case, there is no chance to complete the rest of the 2 optional missions. From my daring guess, there might be 2 paths to this dungeon, one of them is the one we experienced, and the other is the hidden storyline that will relate to the last 2 optional missions and has yet to be triggered by anyone. In order to defeat the enemy and make them retreat, I feel it has to be approached from the intelligence. After investigating, I noticed a new opportunity. There are 10 minutes to prepare before the dungeon officially starts. This is actually the time before the Hesla agents start to act. If this can be prevented and the intelligence doesn't leak, the dungeon storyline might be different. However, this is a very tough battle. No one had succeeded yet. Lastly, a reminder to all players, do not have any contact with Black Phantom. Once you meet him, it's most likely death. The players were very passionate about dungeons. There were all sorts of analysis posts in the forums. Han Xiao did not know what the dungeon was actually like. Although he had chosen the event, the mission had been generated automatically, but he just had to see the shared videos on the forums to know what the players experienced. The players are actually on Dark Crow Valley base's side. Is it because the dungeon will be too easy if they are on my side? Han Xiao was speechless. Suddenly, he had a flash of insight. That's a good thing, too. High difficulty dungeons have richer reward, and only then will the players be passionate about it for a longer time. It's based on me, so no one knows about the key points to this part of the storyline more than me. I could use this advantage and make some very specifically targeted machinery and sell to the players to help them complete the mission. The more the players benefited from the dungeon, the more he would benefit. His intention was not to have the dungeon discourage all the players. Also, he would make money once again from selling targeted machinery to help the players. This is a business opportunity. Han Xiao was a doer. He produced a large batch of targeted machinery the next day. There were a specially made helmet that protected against ranged sniping and a device that increased the movement speed in the forest. As soon as these were released, the tortured players immediately liked them, and the products were sold out instantly. When there is demand, there will be market potential. Han Xiao was very clear about that principle. He grabbed onto all business opportunities and created a new business chain. Han Xiao was too lazy to even count the money he earned. He only knew it was a lot of money. As aquamarine dollars was not a general currency in the galaxy, he kept splurging and converting his money into machinery, material, and rare resources, yet not only did he not have more money because of that, his money continuously increased. When Han Xiao had still been a player, he had spent every cent with caution. Now, he had more money than he could spend. Even the Fabian Company's warehouses were bought out by him and needed to be restocked. It's so troubling to have so much money. Han Xiao was troubled for real. He was not planning to bring a ton of aquamarine dollars into the galaxy and use it as toilet paper. With new machinery, it was finally easier for the players to complete the dungeon. The new machinery that he built became standard equipment for the dungeon in the mind of the players. Compared to the rich reward in the dungeon, the cost was acceptable, so the players felt it was worth it. At least one person had to have the equipment in a 5-man team. It was almost a necessity. The money stacked up, and Han Xiao earned another bucket of gold. The difficulty level of the dungeon also decreased from NetEase to Tencent 1. Although Tencent always received a lot of complaints, they were still quite kind compared to NetEase. The difference between the two could be illustrated by Tencent: you can't enjoy the game if you have no money. NetEase: you can't enjoy the game. The long-term benefits of becoming an NPC in charge of a dungeon are great. I will not have to worry about attracting players as long as I'm present. This is a version 1.0 main storyline, so dungeons below LV60 can last me for a very long time. I will temporarily only create Dark Crow Valley dungeon, and once the average level increases, I will make new dungeons. This way, the player's needs can always be satisfied, and it can last for a long term. Also, with more dungeons being distributed, the players will know more about my experience, which is very helpful in making a deeper impression in the hearts of the players. I have to let the players know that other than being handsome, I have countless more strengths. Han Xiao took the players very seriously, as it was unavoidable to interact with players if he wanted to grow quickly, and the players were a group of lawless people. Thus, he did not want to stand against them. Although he was very far ahead of the players, once the players grew stronger, they would still be able to cause some trouble when they appeared in groups. The great mechanic Han had to admit this: he was never too full of himself. Dark Crow Valley Operation Dungeon created a wave in the sanctuary. The sanctuary's functions were already getting richer with time, and the appearance of the dungeon caused it to improve drastically. In the hearts of the players, the position of the main city was already having its fundamentals. Chapter 290, Sucker. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Hundreds of resource boxes were stacked neatly in the warehouse. Inside were the countless parts and materials that Han Xiao had hoarded. This was his secret base below Sanctuary 3. During the construction of the sanctuary, Han Xiao had secretly expanded the base. It was now his hidden stronghold, and every route had authorization identification equipped with guarding machine guns. There were also surveillance cameras in every entrance and countless spider detectors lurking in the dark. The security was very tight. Han Xiao had a total of 3 warehouses, one for materials and parts, another for machinery backlog that he built for EXP and to sell to players, and the last was the important warehouse, storing the equipment he was using, including the new mechanical suit, Amphiptera. All the items in his warehouses were part of his preparation for his interstellar travel. The recent dungeon function had earned him a lot of profit once again. Money was pouring in, but he had no idea how much he would have when he left the planet. However, the very positive situation did not make him too excited. He saw some problems too. The money that he earned came from players, and where did the players get their money? Of course, their money came from other NPCs by doing missions. Technically, what the players were doing was gathering the fortune of the NPCs everywhere and giving it all to Han Xiao as a form of expenditure, forming a torrent of money. The money was moving and formed an assembly line. He could be considered the destination of this assembly line. Therefore, if the players wanted to earn money, they had to work for other NPCs, and to increase the average spending and purchasing power of the players, he had to increase the number of NPCs in the sanctuary. There was also another problem. The players would not stay in the main city forever, they would definitely go to other places to do missions and experience the storyline. To have these players return in the future, other than to have the various events, the main city had to be made more accessible. Han Xiao planned to lay out a new transportation network in the sanctuary, building railway tracks and scheduling regular flights. This required a very high budget, and the Darknet could not fund it temporarily. Bennett was currently developing new sanctuaries, and they did not have extra money. These two problems had the same solution. Find a sucker who was willing to pay the money and provide manpower. The phone rang. Huang Yu's voice appeared after it was picked up. The visiting group of the Alumera family has arrived at the sanctuary entrance. Shall we let them in? A meaningful smile appeared on Han Xiao's face as he played with the bullet shells. Yes, of course, we need to let them in. A convoy parked outside the sanctuary entrance. Xiao Jin had personally brought people to visit. The people who came were mostly members of the Xiao faction. With Xiao Jin as the leader, there were a few nephews and children. Other than the Xiao faction, the Home faction and Red Island faction also sent their messengers along, mostly to express their standpoint. They waited at the entrance for quite some time, but Xiao Jin did not show any sign of impatience. He knew very clearly that he was the weak party, and he was here to plead. After a very long time, they were finally let in. He looked around on the way and observed the facilities in the sanctuary, nodding. Following Huang Yu to the guest hall, he raised his head and immediately saw Han Xiao sitting on the master seat, sizing them up with a mocking expression. Without the mask, this face in the eyes of these Xiao faction people was the missing Han Xiao, but they could not see through Han Xiao at all. It was like he was totally a different person. His eyes were as if he was looking at a group of strangers. Xiao Jin did not dare to call him son. He cleared his throat and said in a low voice, "Black Phantom." Han Xiao looked at them without any expression and did not reply. He simply sat with his back against the chair, played with the bullet in his hand, and stared at them. Xiao Jin understood his intention. He looked at Xiao Hai and the rest of the youngsters behind him and gave them a sign by tilting his head. These Xiao faction youngsters caused a commotion, but after a few seconds of hesitation and procrastination, they unwillingly greeted him. "Stepfather." "Oh, you're here," Han Xiao said coldly. Han Xiao knew that Xiao Jin definitely expected this awkward relationship issue to happen before they came, and these youngsters were definitely mentally prepared. All this hesitation were acted just for him. Xiao Jin wanted him to go back to being Xiao Jin's son and strengthen their relationship. However, this was completely useless to him, since he was not the real Han Xiao. Han Xiao was not moved. "What are you visiting me for?" Seeing the situation, Xiao Jin coughed and said, "I can explain what happened in the past. Your elder brother wants to apologize to you personally." Xiao Hai took a deep breath, put on a very apologetic expression, and quickly revised the script in his heart one more time. He had already come up with his apology on the way there. He would cry and grovel, and he would show his regret and self-hatred for what he had done. Then, there would be a high chance to get Han Xiao's forgiveness. As long as their relationship was restored, Alumera would be able to rely on this strong force. No matter how unwilling Xiao Hai was, he had to brace himself and put on the act. Xiao Hai was about to take a step forward and start to speak. Bang! Everyone was shocked. They followed the sound and looked over. A bullet crater still giving out smoke appeared under Xiao Hai's foot. If he had taken that step forward, the bullet would have hit the back of his foot. Xiao Hai could not take the step and froze in place. The empty bullet shell fell to the floor. A dark blue electromagnetic force covered his finger, and black smoke came out of the tip of his fingernail. The flick of his hand had acted as a firing pin, detonating the base and shooting out a bullet with his bare hands. Even Han Xiao himself felt it was cool and awesome. Its power was limited, but it was enough to scare people. "I don't need an apology, get down to business," Han Xiao said coldly. Xiao Jin's expression changed slightly. It was clear that Han Xiao did not want to talk about emotions and only wanted to talk about their deal, which disrupted his plan. Without a choice, he could only ask Xiao Hai to step back. Xiao Hai clenched his teeth tightly. He had already planned to apologize, but he was not even given a chance to read his script. Han Xiao did not even look at him. Xiao Jin focused his mind and said in a low voice, "The germinal organization is gone, and the Six Nations will be the only large organization from now on. Due to climate deterioration, many wanderers will choose to leave their colonies and join the Six Nations. Once the Six Nations finish resting and recovering, sooner or later, they will clear out us scattered warlords, even if we were once Six Nations partners. Unless you can find someone to protect you." Han Xiao rubbed his chins. Xiao Jin nodded. He wanted to plan for the future, to rely on Han Xiao and the dark net. Han Xiao changed the topic and said, "It's time to pay back what you owe. Don't you have any idea how you got to where you are today?" Xiao Jin was speechless. He wanted to play the emotion card, but Han Xiao just wanted to talk business, just like back then when he was only known as Black Phantom. "What do you want to see?" "Money, manpower, and to move your people into the sanctuary. It's not easy to chase the dead if you're so far away." The expressions of the visitors shifted slightly. This would mean they had to give up what they had built. They looked at Xiao Jin and waited for his decision. Xiao Jin kept silent for a while and decided to compromise. "Okay." His eyes were looking at the future. The war had brought chaos, but it had also brought order. There would be fewer and fewer wanderers. Once the Six Nations had the time, the idea of warlords and colonies would disappear. Compared to waiting, it was better to look for a way out and change the business model of the family. Darknet Sanctuary was considered a colony as well, but different from them warlords, the Six Nations allowed the existence of sanctuaries. Xiao Jin pondered and felt this might be an opportunity, so he agreed. After getting the others to leave, Han Xiao and Xiao Jin were the only ones left. They discussed the details of the deal, and Xiao Jin kept compromising. The end result was Alumra would be funding the building of transportation network and slowly migrate their people from all their strongholds into the sanctuary, including the refugees and wanderer under their rule, to increase the population of the sanctuary. Alumra was the succor that Han Xiao was looking for. Han Xiao had absolutely no intention of inheriting the thoughts of the original owner of his body, but this could be a chip to use Alumra. These people were not noble themselves anyway. "Heard your southern continent division is still troubling Lu Cheng, he's my friend." Xiao Jin sighed. "I know what to do." Other than Alumra, Han Xiao also planned to pull in Lu Cheng. He was not going to let Alumra be the only one to grow. The dark net would support his operations. Thinking about that, he remembered that there were still some blueprints that he had yet to receive from Old Man Lu. Chapter 291, 4 Blueprints. Ever since what happened in Green Valleyville Chapter 320, Development Plan and Scavengers. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. After getting rid of the others, Han Xiao walked into the room alone and let out a deep breath. He finally had the chance to be alone with the first step of entering the galaxy completed. There were many opportunities in the universe and many plans for what to do next, so he needed to decide on one path to take. Firstly, he was located in the Garden Galaxy of the Colton Star Cluster, and with his strength, this area was dangerous but just right for him to grow. As a LV-70 mechanic, grade C super, he was considered at the middle level of the supers in Colton Star Cluster. The universe was divided into many star fields, and the Colton Star Cluster belonged to the Shattered Star Ring star field. The Shattered Star Ring was located at the edge of the visible universe and considered rural. Its name came from its structure. This star field was like a broken, shattered ring of stars, every star cluster being part of this ring. At the heart of the Shattered Star Ring was a dangerous place with an enormous cluster of wormholes, where the universe's waste was being thrown out from numerous star fields, floating in the area and forming a waste dump. Because of this, scavenger groups were very active in the Shattered Star Ring. There were quite a number of uncommon occupations in the galaxy, such as the galaxy pirates, scavengers, mercenaries, colony explorers, and so on. The Shattered Star Ring did not have a single ruling authority, only scattered star clusters and galactic civilizations, so there were many areas with a worrying level of law and order. The Shattered Star Ring was rightfully ruled by West Sadling, but this civilization only had their emissary reside at the local offices and hardly managed the area. West Sadling was the official name of the Universal Civilization Federation of Light. The bigger the area, the more dangerous it was. Han Xiao remembered many opportunities, but according to the current situation, the best decision was to stay in the Colton Star Cluster and grow first. It was still version 1.0, and he was not very familiar with the storyline in the galaxy since the players at this stage had yet to enter it in his previous life. However, some large missions were most likely still the same. The first step is to get an information source. Ubaerly Hub is chaotic, and there are many agencies from different organizations here. I can try to attach to an organization and get some initial intelligence, Han Xiao thought. As long as he could get his hands on some information, he would be able to know which were the large storyline missions suitable for him. The most important target was to become stronger. He was not restricted by the version and was always ahead of the players, so he had to maintain this lead in this world filled with danger. It was like riding a boat against the current. If he did not go forward, he would be going backward. For now, Han Xiao's main class was stuck at the class advancement mission. He had to first find a subclass, level up to LV80, get enough attribute points, and increase his int to more than 400. He did not want to take this lightly. More and more experience would be required to level up, so he wanted to find a valuable, rare subclass. From what he had earned during the Pro League, the amount of experience that he had in his interface was about 2,700,000,000, which would last him for quite some time without having to worry about experience expenses. The amount of resources and equipment that he had accumulated had the value of thousands of INAs, and the specific value depended on the buyer's demand and the fluctuating value of machinery, which could not be determined before the deal. The other class advancement requirement was to have 5 mechanic class advancement knowledges. In the universe, there were comparatively more ways to get super knowledge. Although the very high-level knowledge was controlled, class advancement knowledge were not difficult to get. Some financial groups and organizations were even selling class advancement knowledge, which meant that he could get them as long as he paid the money. As long as he had enough money, he could even buy all the class advancement knowledges. And in terms of earning money, not that Han Xiao was bragging, he was really not bad at it. Players are equivalent to labor, I can get INAs through them indirectly, and they can also provide assistance to me. If I make them mercenaries, I can get paid while they do the missions. However, in order to make a large amount of profit, the best is to sell rare items, such as mining for some precious minerals, or get rewarded from some old wanted missions. The existence of players was his advantage, and they could be of great help if he did things the right way, which was why he had chosen to bring the players along. Growing and leveling up was the core target, but Han Xiao also had another target, which was to try to solve the mutation disaster in planet Aquamarine of version 2.0 in advance. In version 2.0, many planets in the Shattered Star Ring encountered the mutation disaster, and the origin of all that was the evil organization of Colton Star Cluster, Dark Star. The novice planets in other star fields would have different storylines. Dark Star was a rebellion from the Godaran civilization, and Han Xiao was very familiar with its history. The origin of the Dark Star mostly came from the discrimination from Godara's pure blood beliefs. Many of the Dark Star members were hybrid Godarans, discriminated against because of their bloodline, which led to their extreme mindset, wanting to overthrow the Godara government. They believed that Godara's regulations were corrupted and that they were the new Godara of the new era. Every civilization had their own mindsets and traditions, and there was not any absolute evidence that inclusion was the more advanced choice. All civilizations had their unique qualities. To respect the traditions and habits of the other civilization, compromising with each other during contact yet not fully accepting them, was the norm of communication between species in the universe. Of course, at the initial stage of universe exploration, cases of uncompromising conflict between civilizations occurring due to their irreconcilable difference in beliefs, habits, and characteristics were not the rarest. Such as the human race and species that fed on humans, there was almost zero possibility of these species communicating with each other, but these extreme civilizations only suffered in the progress, and as the super civilizations implanted their laws and regulations, even these species had to accept the existence of each other. Godara originated from magic. Before they came into contact with the galaxy, all Godarans were pure blood. Only after they mated with other intelligent species did hybrid Godarans appear. So, the pure-blood belief had started to spread, emphasizing on the importance of their traditions. Those with authority were all pure blood, therefore, the pure blood and hybrids started to witness new class differences. As Godara grew, more and more hybrids were born, and the bloodline talent of Godarans was gradually diluted. Thus, they took more importance in the pure blood belief. The extreme ones of the pure blood believers did not even consider the hybrids as the same race. The conflict became ever more intense, and finally, Darkstar was born, acting against Godara in almost every aspect with an extreme and evil style of doing things. In order to solve the mutation disaster, I have to start with the Godaran civilization. The mutation virus had very strong latency. In his previous life, it had only been taken seriously after the disaster completely exploded, so all he could do for now was only prepare for the future. These two targets were the key points for the current stage. He contemplated the details of the plan, turned on the communicator, browsed the interstellar channel, and focused on the information regarding the current situation and environment of the Colton star cluster. At this time, an announcement was made from the broadcast. Everyone, please return to your rooms. The ship is about to speed up and enter the light jump tunnel. Turbulence might be experienced. If you suffer from dizziness, please do not panic, it's a normal reaction. Rapid footsteps could be heard outside the doors. All of the passengers returned to their rooms, including Kurlad and the players. Black safety belts came out of the wall. Safety measures like protective cabins were too much to expect with such low-grade travel agencies. After buckling up the safety belt, the room doors locked automatically. A loud roar came from within the spaceship, and the metal walls and floors were trembling. Right after, a force came from above and pressed everyone strongly into their seats. This was the reaction force even after being weakened many times by the various devices. Shorthorn Star shot out a blazing flame and sped up rapidly. Streams of light suddenly appeared in the darkness outside the windows, like entering a tunnel of light. Hum. As the pressing force reached its peak, Shorthorn Star flashed and turned into a stream of light. The engine operated at its full capacity. After entering the tunnel, the reaction force rapidly weakened because of the internal stabilization devices. Next stop, Garden Galaxy Star Zone 5. Travel time, 3 days. Please enjoy your trip. In those 3 days, Han Xiao kept a low profile on the ship, whereas the players were rather warm-hearted. They started conversations with the other passengers and asked to help them passionately. It was the first time that these passengers had seen such warm humans, and they realized the players had very limited knowledge after having conversations and assumed them to be natives. Kurlad was having a dark blue drink at the bar when a hybrid human with sharp ears and bony face walked up beside him, tossed an Inez coin, signifying that this cup was on him, and said with a smile, "You boarded from planet Aquamarine, right? That low-class planet is just a low-class civilization, and the people you brought onto the ship are all natives, aren't they? What does that have to do with you?" Kurlad looked at him sideways. Hee, are you interested in a deal? My name is Sisoli. I do this. This person was wearing gloves. He discreetly lifted up the gap and showed the tattoo on the back of his hand, a bird wrapped in chains. That was a label for a slavery trade organization, one of the many scavenger businesses. Kurlad waved impatiently and said, F***ck off. I don't want to waste my time with you. Public spaceships were rather chaotic with quite many hidden gray organizations looking for suckers. Therefore, people who had the choice all disdained traveling with galactic travel agencies. Kurlad disliked being in contact with scavengers very much. It spoiled his mood so much that he even lost his interest in his favorite dark blue star bubbles. Don't be so quick to reject. I can see all of the natives that you've brought along are supers, so their prices will be quite good. Consider it, okay? At this time, Han Xiao's cold voice appeared from behind the two. I think it's time for you to leave. Sisoli turned his head around and saw Han Xiao standing behind, expressionless. He smiled without caring, ignored Han Xiao, and gave Kurlad a slight bow before leaving. Lu Cheng and Alumira had been in a bad relationship with each other. Lu Cheng's Black Pine colony received numerous attacks and suffered quite some damage. Since Alumira had joined Han Xiao wanted to settle this problem for Lu Cheng, so he called. It's you. Lu Cheng was cautious on the call. He had also received the intelligence that Han Xiao came from Alumira, so this raised his alertness and made him doubt Han Xiao's motive in contacting him before. Don't worry, Alumira will not be looking for trouble from you any longer. Han Xiao was straightforward and expressed his standpoint. Lu Chen did not understand. What do you mean? I'm not on Alumra's side, at least I was not. Now, they have joined me, and I have settled your conflict with them. Han Xiao laughed. Friends should help each other. Okay. Lu Cheng's tone softened a little. Thinking of their relationship before, he felt Han Xiao would not lie to him, and he did not need to. He was just a small warlord, and Han Xiao was now a legend. After the war, the Six Nations will be the only large organization, and there will be fewer wanderers. Warlords will definitely be cleared out in the future, Han Xiao repeated Xiao Jin's words. Basically, what he meant was the business you're doing now has no future, my brother. You will definitely lose everything in the future, but my business has potential. Don't say I didn't remind you. Now there's an opportunity, and I want you. Don't let my kindness go to waste. Lu Chen was a little tempted. Let me consider. After they finished talking about business matters, Han Xiao asked if Li Jinai was still in Black Pine Colony, and to that, Lu Cheng's answer was he had already left. Han Xiao had some thoughts. Li Jinai was the mechanic that built PE0 nanotechnology muscle fiber, and Old Man Lu had entrusted him to help Lu Cheng. Once Li Jinai left, it would be the chance to get the 4 blueprints that Old Man Lu had left behind. Old Man Lu would try to pass the message to Lu Cheng, who would then send someone back to the repair shop back in Star Dragon to retrieve the blueprints. Although their father and son relationship was very rigid, Old Man Lu still had a lot of love as a father. Han Xiao shook his head discreetly. This reminded him of his dad. Oh, he was not talking about Xiao Jin. Old Man Lu's 4 blueprints were very rare items. They had very unique styles and could be considered a set of godly equipment in the early stages of a mechanic. The chance to get those through knowledge fusion was extremely low, so Han Xiao was tempted. He now had 3 fighting styles: ranged kiting style with the ghost sniper rifle and electromagnetic hover boots, all-round style with his Amphiptera mechanical suit, and mechanical pugilist style with compounded magnetic chain split blades and thermoelectrical incisor gloves. These 3 styles made up his current combat style. The other machinery was not counted as part of his usual tactics, such as the rush style with Gen 2.5 rangers and batteries, or the pure machinery style with a large number of firearms, as these were rarely used. Ever since the creation of the Snake series mechanical suits, Han Xiao had rarely gambled for new blueprints. He knew the knowledge fusion combination needed for the blueprints. Other than trying his luck occasionally, he only spent EXP to fuse specific blueprints when he needed them. Old Man Lu's 4 blueprints belonged to a new standalone tactical combat style. It was equal to being free. Of course, Han Xiao would not miss it. The sun slowly moved closer to the horizon, dyeing Star Dragon western capital in a dusk glow. The people on the streets were in a hurry, as if the night was a monster and they wanted to be back home before it came. Han Xiao walked on the street slowly. It had been close to a year since he left, and now that he had returned, the feeling that the city gave him was slightly different. For one, there were more people. The remains of the paint from the anti-war protests could still be seen on the corners of the walls, and the large screen on the building far away played the news about their victory in the war and the upcoming climate deterioration. The city was covered in a heavy-hearted air, and the residents were worried and lost about their fate in the future. Han Xiao was wearing the facial simulator and had a different appearance, wearing a wool coat. It was already winter, and these clothes were very low profile and ordinary. Back at the repair shop that he had left long ago, it still had the same structure. Even his workshop remained beside the shop. Han Xiao walked into the shop, and a buzzing sound came from the workstation. Lu Jian was focusing on assembling machinery. She was alone. Old Man Lu, who usually sat at the door, was missing. Lu Jian turned around. Seeing that a customer was there, she hastily put down her work and approached him with a smile. "Hello, what do you need?" Lu Jian still had the familiar look, gentle and dedicated, like a spring breeze. Han Xiao sized her up and said without changing his expression, "I would like to customize something small." "Customize what?" Lu Jian blinked. Han Xiao took out a blueprint and passed it to Lu Jian. It was a mini metal statue drawing, not very technical, just needed welding and grinding. Any machinery assembly shop could complete it. Lu Jian looked at it for a while and said while nodding, "No problem, come to take tomorrow." Han Xiao shook his head. "I'm leaving the city tomorrow, I need it tonight." With a troubled expression, Lu Jian said, "It takes about 2 hours to build the statue, and I'll close the shop when it gets dark. It's too bad, really, then I guess I can only go to another shop. Han Xiao acted upset and mumbled, now where might I find a repair shop that takes $30,000 jobs like this at this late of an hour? Lu Qian's eyes sparkled instantly, and she changed her response immediately. Today's closing time is delayed, you can wait in the shop and receive the product as soon as it's finished. Han Xiao laughed discreetly. He knew Lu Qian too well, this method worked every time. There was only a chance to find Old Man Lu's box if he stayed in the shop. Of course, he could not ask Lu Qian directly as it would raise caution. At this time, a new customer entered. It was a short-haired man. He said, I want to buy some household machinery. Do you have any? Yes. Lu Qian pointed toward the metal shelf on the side and said, everything on that is for sale. Sorry, I currently am doing something, so if you could browse the products on your own. Han Xiao casually pulled up a chair and sat down. Suddenly, he sensed something and looked to the side. He saw that the man who walked in was sizing up the items on the shelf while discreetly sizing him up and observing him. Old Man Lu's identity was special, so he had entrusted Division 13 to take care of Lu Qian before leaving. There was always someone that monitored the place nearby, preventing anyone from harming Lu Qian. This new customer was one of the regular field agents, and he had come to observe Han Xiao. Division 13's man. Han Xiao's senses at LV-70 were very sharp, so he noticed this man's footsteps showed unique signs of having trained in the military. He could guess it easily with just a little bit of thinking. His expression did not change, and he watched quietly. He was not afraid of getting recognized as he had changed his face for the time being. It got dark, and Lu Qian was focused. Han Xiao sat on the other side, and that man was still looking at the shelf and monitoring him. Han Xiao's brows rose. He could not move freely when under surveillance. He shook his leg, and a mini spider detector crawled out his pocket, moving stealthily following the shadows. Han Xiao took out his laptop while blocking the vision of the other man with his body. He looked down and opened the control panel for the spider detector, then switched it to manual control. The visual image of the mini spider detector showed on the bottom right of the screen, moving close to the ground. The detector was equipped with a metal detection device, and the pipes hidden under the walls and the ground were all reflected. He remembered Old Man Lu's safe was metal, so he used metal detection. Half an hour later, the spider detector found the target in Lu Qian's room on the second floor. A suitcase-style safe was under the bed. Han Xiao's eyes spun. He stood up immediately and asked, is there a toilet here? Lu Qian looked up and wiped her sweat. It's upstairs. I can bring you. No need to, you do your stuff. I can go myself. Han Xiao rejected her and walked upstairs. After a few steps, he suddenly heard that field agent following him up with the excuse of wanting to go to the toilet as well. Han Xiao felt a little troubled. It was not easy to act when he was being monitored by someone. Suddenly, he had an evil idea. Coming to the toilet on the second floor, he suddenly turned around and punched the field agent in his face. The field agent had no time to react at all and could only feel his vision getting blurry and his nose being in extreme pain. Then, he fainted. Han Xiao held onto him and laid him down on the ground slowly. He walked into Lu Qian's room, pulled out the safe from under the bed, and keyed in the password he remembered. Ka-cha. The cover opened. Han Xiao gave it a scan, and the interface notified him that he had received 4 rare blueprints, so it was confirmed. He was delighted, rolled the blueprints up, and placed them into his bag. Then he took out the substitutes from his bag and placed them into the box, restoring it back to its place. The substitutes were also machinery blueprints, but they were just normal blueprints. There would be players in the future who would go through countless hardships to complete this mission. Thus, by putting something inside, the player who completed the mission would at least get something. Han Xiao felt that he had such a kind heart, almost so touching it could move the whole of galaxy. He carried the field agent down. Lu Qian was shocked and asked, what happened to him? Han Xiao purposely put on a face of disgust and said, so this man wanted to use the toilet together with me. I wasn't really feeling the idea, so I kinda knocked him out. Lu Qian's expression became weird. Her eyes looked around on the field agent's body then mumbled, so exciting. Han Xiao sat down peacefully. He did not panic after knocking a person from Division 13 out. This was because of his strength. Plus, Lu Jian and he knew each other quite some time ago, so he did not want to disappear for nothing and make Lu Jian scared. He chatted with Lu Jian to fill the silence. C-156 please respond. C-156 please respond. In a large room of a building a few hundred meters away, a team of field agents to protect Lu Jian was on standby. The captain kept repeating the same line into the walkie-talkie, trying to reach the field agent in the repair shop. After not getting a response at all, their faces started to get serious. *T, he's lost contact. There must be an accident in the shop. Let's move now. The captain stood up immediately, changed into a bulletproof vest, brought along an ammunition belt, and burst through the door with the team in tow. Chapter 292, Sonic Sphere. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. The cool night wind blew in from the window, and the buzzing sound of the workstation filled their ears. It was a little noisy, but Han Xiao was chatting casually with Lu Jian. Your shop has been here for quite a number of years, how's business? Lu Jian's hair was tied back, and she wore a safety mask. While looking down and welding the metal, she replied, with such a bad location, of course, the business isn't good. You seemed busy when I came in. Lu Jian shook her head. I'm the only one here. With the orders stacking up, of course, there is always something to do. Aren't you going to hire a helper? Lu Jian paused and sighed. I hired one before, they were pretty good, but he ended up cutting out of here without saying a word. I'd bet it was because the salary was too low. Han Xiao smiled and shook his head in mock disapproval. Was that really the reason? Lu Jian doubted, not sure whether she should be taking the man seriously. She was just learning to own and operate a business, and Uncle Lu was the kind of surly bastard that seemed determined to let her learn by the sink or swim method, so she still wasn't great with these kinds of things. Han Xiao had left without saying goodbye back then and had been uncontactable since, so Lu Jian still held a grudge. The apprentice worker whom they had finally been able to hire had disappeared like a passing breeze, as if their kindness meant nothing, even if they were kinda taking advantage of his skill. But still, he was a little shady. Although they did not spend a very long time together, Han Xiao had left a very deep impression on Lu Jian. Old man Lu and she had been the only ones in the shop before, and with one more person joining in, it had felt much livelier. She had felt happy during the time they spent together. However, even after a very long wait, Han Xiao still had not returned, greatly upsetting Lu Jian. Since business is not good, have you ever thought of moving elsewhere? Lu Jian shook her head. This is my home. Rapid and dense footsteps approached. A group of field agents arrived in the dark. At this time, the unconscious field agent slowly woke up. His expression changed, and he immediately wanted to get up with a roll. However, a fist enlarged in front of his eyes. Bang! Han Xiao knocked him out once again right before the eyes of the field agent team. Freeze, raise your hands. The field agent team raised their guns and aimed at Han Xiao as the captain yelled, We are Star Dragon Strategic Defense Division. We need to verify your identity. You have to come with us. Swoosh. With a few flashes of light, the muzzles of the field agent team's handguns were sliced open smoothly. The captain's expression changed immediately. Requesting back. Boom. 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 In a blink of an eye, Han Xiao, who had been sitting on the chair just a second ago, was in the middle of the people. The field agent team who had entered ferociously were now all on the floor. With his attributes, knocking down these LV-10 normal field agents in an instant was a piece of cake. Security is too weak. I hope this will make Division 13 strengthen their guards. It would be best if they don't start to let the players in. Han Xiao shook his head, took out stacks of cash, placed it on the table, and left. Lu Jian regained focus. She stared at Han Xiao's back and suddenly asked, Have we met before? Without turning back, Han Xiao smiled faintly and said, No, we haven't. After he disappeared into the night, Lu Jian put down the things in her hands. She took off the protective mask, tucked her hair behind her ear, and suddenly smiled, a smile with unspoken meanings. Han Xiao smuggled himself out of the western capital, boarded the helicopter back to the sanctuary, and then took out the blueprints that he had just received. Blueprint, magnetic chain-style hovering shield shuttle. Blueprint, sonic sphere penetrate. Blueprint, sonic sphere quake. Blueprint, Sonic Sphere Scout. These 4 machines made up a unique combat style, with both offensive and defensive capabilities. The 3 different types of sonic spheres were the core equipment. They all had different functions that complemented one another. As the name suggested, sonic spheres were related to sonic attacks. Ultrasound and infrasound were equipped in the penetrate style, focused on damage. Noise sonic and strong sonic were equipped in the quake style, focused on disabling. The scout style was focused on support, related to sonar detection. It could also enhance the power of the other 2 types of sonic spheres, as well as create an area where all sonic attacks within the area would be enhanced. Plus, it had MP3 functions. The requirements to learn these 4 blueprints were LV45, requiring more than 250 intelligence, with basic acoustics LV.5, basic mechanical engineering LV.5, basic energy theory LV.5, basic energy conversion LV.5, basic spatial sensing LV.3, and basic electromagnetism LV.4. Han Xiao had 68 potential points at the moment. He spent 12 to level up what was needed and satisfied the requirements. One day later, Han Xiao returned to the sanctuary and immediately started building the equipment. The core technology of the sonic spheres was acoustics. The most important part was the emitter of the sonic attacks. Pipes to produce sound frequencies needed to be made with electromagnetic plates and micro-adjusted according to different sonic attack types, and to connect these pipes together into a sphere frame required high skills. He spent quite some time before he finally built the end product. The 3 metal spheres lay on the workstation quietly. They were roughly 2/3 the size of an average human head. They were not entirely spherical, and there were some edges and corners. The exterior was made of cold armor to protect the interior core, and the emitters were hidden in the gaps between the armor. The original control method involved hand signs and whistling. Han Xiao changed that into nerves connection control. By wearing a specially made headset, it would convert the nerve signals and send them into the receivers within the sonic spheres to be identified into commands, and this was effective within 60 meters. Up, Han Xiao commanded in his mind. The armor plate of these 3 sonic spheres split open and exposed black holes. White flames shot out from them, and they flew up, wobbling, hovering in midair. The sonic spheres had flying capabilities and could move freely in the air. It was his mid-range combat equipment. Han Xiao familiarized himself with the controls. He then started to test the power of the sonic spheres. After some observation, Han Xiao found that the range of sonic sphere penetrate was about 20 meters. It was used mainly to damage the target, creating armor penetration sound waves and attacking the target through obstacles. The attack range was in a straight line or an inverted cone. The basic damage of sonic sphere penetrate was 81 to 130. Although that did not look very high, that was not the case. The specialty of sonic attacks was that they are highly penetrative. The damage reduction from armor was very low, and with Han Xiao's attribute enhancements and skill enhancements, one hit from it could deal 350 to 400 damage. If flaming wool was used as well, it would not be weaker than the Ghost sniper rifle that dealt at least 350 damage. Furthermore, the damage output of sonic sphere penetrate was more stable than the Ghost sniper rifle. It could be used as a new main combat method. Sonic sphere quake had area disabling effects. It could cause debuffs like stunned, shocked, paralyzed, unconscious and such. Its attack range was a sphere of 10 meters in diameter. Sonic Sphere Scout could create a sonic enhancing zone in a diameter of 100 meters, increasing the damage and effects of the other 2. Thud. Sonic Sphere Penetrate sped up in an instant, smashed a pit on the metal wall, and made a loud noise. The Sonic Sphere was very sophisticated. He smashed it against the wall to test its interior durability. This smash made it lose 17 durability, and the total durability of the Sonic Sphere was 1600. 1% is lost with just one hit. Seems it won't last long if it's attacked. The 3 Sonic Spheres, one for offense, one for control, and one for support, worked together. The defense would be taken care of by the magnetic chain-style hovering shield shuttle, with about the same technology as the compounded magnetic chain split blades but for defense. Technically, it was a shield generator. The hovering shuttles would form a shape in the air, then connect with each other with electromagnetic energy. The shape it formed would become an electromagnetic shield. Shielding technology was very common in the galaxy, but there was almost no mature shield technology on planet Aquamarine. In the galactic standard, this kind of single-surface shield was very basic. However, it was rare machinery in version 1.0. He could control at most 4 sonic spheres at one time. Controlling more would mean lower accuracy. To mechanics, receiving strong machinery did not mean that its powers could be fully utilized right away. Many complicated machines required the user to be very familiar with them in order to be able to utilize their full potential. The skills of mechanic players were also based on how they used their best machinery, so-called microcontrol. However, microcontrol was a piece of cake for the experienced great mechanic Han. Including the sonic sphere style, I now have 4 combat methods. The core style would be Amphiptera mechanical suit, in cooperation with the other 3, capable of ranged, mid-ranged, and melee styles. These will be enough for any situation at the moment. I will not need any new combat methods anytime soon. Han Xiao suddenly remembered that he had taken away what belonged to Lu Cheng, and he wondered what Lu Cheng's reaction would be after he noticed the blueprints that he had replaced these with. Old man Lu might find him to complain. That was good as well. It had been quite some time since he last saw old man Lu, and he missed him a little. Chapter 293, Galaxy Pro League Season 1, Commence. A period of stability arrived on planet Aquamarine. Time passed by quick, and 4 months passed in a blink of an eye. Sanctuary 3 was completed with tall guarding walls, filtered air, self-sufficient greenhouse farms, and many more. The aim of the sanctuary was to protect humans in times of disaster or even protect the tinder of mankind. In the last 4 months, Bennett had built more sanctuaries, but none of them could match up to the size of Black Phantom Sanctuary 3. Alumra and Lu Cheng had already migrated their people over, built the guarding city surrounding Sanctuary 3, paid the money, and provided the manpower to build an efficient transportation network, which spread all over the sanctuary. Han Xiao's sanctuary could be considered a large city. The rewards of this main storyline mission were calculated and given. Han Xiao had almost finished most of the constructions, so he was given an A+ grade. Sanctuary Plan, Sanctuary 3 completed. You have received 6,500,000 EXP. You have received 1 potential point. Grade, A+. Plus 2,500 Darknet relationship points. Current relationship, Reverence, 6,000, Leader of Darknet. A+ grade reward, bonus 250% EXP, 16,250,000, special item *1. You have received Medal of Honor, Sanctuary Owner, A. An experience reward was the main reward of this construction type main storyline, unlike the Germinal Organization main storyline with many special items or any random reward. There was also no new dungeon creation right in the NPC panel, probably because it was just a construction type main storyline and very little actually happened. Although the war ended, there were still many more areas in planet Aquamarine that could be explored. The more the players explored planet Aquamarine, the more the 6 nations would fear the Inhumans that were becoming stronger as time passed by. However, in conclusion, the situation of planet Aquamarine was stable. During this time, the main storylines and the main characters in other novice planets had surfaced and started to shine, whereas the heat on planet Aquamarine had cooled down. Han Xiao was making preparation in peace in the sanctuary. As a main storyline main character, the times he was mentioned gradually became fewer. Most players only remembered him when they bought loot boxes. Just like Galaxy Times said, when a main storyline ended, the corresponding main character would also fade away. Han Xiao was not worried about the reducing attention. The things that he did were already deeply printed into the players' hearts, so he had already built his base. Even if he was covered by the other popular topics, once he made any more news, the players would still be immediately reminded of him. In 4 months' time, he had collected a large amount of EXP, and the EXP on his interface had a long string of zeros. Due to the interaction he had with the players, his position of mechanic mentor was firm, so many new players in the game would also buy things from him. This was a long-term benefit. His business was prospering. Han Xiao had a very comfortable life during this peaceful time, but he did not forget where he came from. He still spent time every day in the workshop, building equipment and training himself, improving and familiarizing himself with his combat methods, making sure he was always at his best and never rusty. He had used the Destiny's Child character summon card and accurately predicted the chance to head toward the galaxy. There was still quite some time left. According to his memory, Pro League Season 1 would start during this time. This was a player festival. Han Xiao had paid a lot of attention to the competition in his previous life, and he was tempted to ride along. If his sanctuary could be the hosting area for the Pro League, it would bring a large number of customers in. The pugilist and Esper class advancement knowledge that he had prepared, the enhancing drugs, the high-level equipment and many more would make him a lot of profit. Han Xiao had cultivated Frenzied Sword, Maple Moon, Bun Hit Dog, and Hao Tian with a lot of effort, hoping that they could get a good result in the Pro League, as it would bring him honor too. Since everyone knew that these 4 people were the lucky ones that had earned Black Phantom's help. Galaxy Calendar Year 689, March 1st. On this day, an announcement marked in red was placed at the top of the forums. Its popularity grew at an unbelievable pace, which meant the number of people viewing and commenting was quickly increasing every second. Within half an hour, it became the most popular post in the entire forum. S1 Galaxy Pro League, officially established. It's finally here. Han Xiao was motivated. When the public launch just started, the rumors of the World Esports Association wanting to host Galaxy Pro League was already being passed around. And after 1.5 months passed in the real world, finally, the official message was announced. This morning, the World Esports Association announced the official opening of the first Galaxy Pro League. This will be the authorized and the highest level competition, a player festival, and the biggest stage for the players to prove themselves. Showcase your skills and the world will cheer for you. There are 37 countries participating in the first season of Galaxy Pro League: China, Japan, Korea, Russia. According to the planet differences in game, it is divided into 13 divisions. They are Planet Aquamarine Division, Planet Brighton Division, Planet Longtoon Division, Planet Lani Division, Planet Aquamarine Division. The matches will be carried out in the following modes: Singles, Challenge, Groups. Singles, Single Player Competition 1 vs 1. Challenge, Team Competition 1 vs 1, winner stays on stage while the next player of the loser enters. Last one standing wins. Groups, Team Competition. Group battle in complex environments. Annihilate the enemy or complete special missions to win. Competition Stage 1 Division Qualifiers, all players are eligible to register. Teams registering must have 9 members, including 6 players, 2 substitutes, and 1 coach. 1 match elimination, determining top 38 teams and top 62 singles in each division. Division Secondary League, 18 teams and 128 single contestants will enter, points-based. Winners and runners-up of each division will enter into the division stage, making up 40 teams and 64 players. Pre-season, warm-up for contestants, no points calculated. Stage 2 Regular divisions, points-based. Teams will compete in challenge and groups. Top 8 teams and 16 players enter the finals. If any player belonging to a team enters top 16 of the singles, that team will receive bonus points. Also, the first team and single player will receive the International Showcase Match invitation. International Showcase Match, All-Stars match, top teams from divisions battle with each other for a showcase, no points calculated. Stage 3 Division Finals, best of 5. Winners of each division will receive the division trophy. The champions, runners-up, and second runners-up will enter the internationals. Stage 4 Internationals, points-based. Top 3 of each division compete. Top 8 teams and top 16 singles enter the international finals. Final stage International Finals, best of 5. Competing for the world champion. Division singles and challenge venues are as follow: Planet Winterfrost, Fisher Canyon. Planet Brighton, Floating Island College. Planet Aquamarine, Black Phantom Sanctuary 3. Registration for qualifiers and secondary league will start tomorrow. We hope all contestants can receive their desired position. S1 Galaxy Pro League officially established. Every player's passion was heeded no matter which planet they were on. It was a worldwide festival. Seeing that Sanctuary 3 was the venue for Planet Aquamarine, Han Xiao heaved a sigh of relief, followed by a rush of excitement. He could almost see a tsunami of customers overwhelming him. The arena was way too suitable for singles and challenge, and he had opened it to the players. With such a suitable location already built, the chance of it becoming the hosting venue was very high. Such a large festival like Pro League being held in his territory was a huge business opportunity. The competition mode for the first season is the same as how I remembered. Because it is the first season, there are only 3 competition modes. It will be more varied later. Just as I expected, it is still qualifiers, regulars, division finals, followed by international finals. The top 3 of both the division finals and international finals will receive huge prizes. All the various clubs are the main contestants of the first season. The normal players can only achieve something in the singles. It is actually easier to become a star in the singles. The clubs will sign some good players after they showcase their skills, and they will become pro players next season, Han Xiao thought. He had experienced it himself. As a renowned mechanic master, he had received invitations from clubs as well, but he had rejected all of them. He did not like the hardship in team training, playing the game comfortably was more suitable for him. Han Xiao touched his chin and pondered, I remember China's result in the first season was normal. Was it North America or a European team that won the champion? France? Maybe Canada? He was staying in a high building in the middle of the sanctuary at this time. He looked down and saw the atmosphere of the players changed. It became filled with excitement, anticipation, and nervousness. And so it begins. Han Xiao was a little excited as well. The commencement of the Pro League spread like a storm, every player knew about it. The teams and pro players of all the countries were motivated. After all their preparations, finally, the worldwide competition that they were waiting for had arrived. Chapter 294, Competition Festival, 1. The registration for group stages is open. The club has already chosen the rest of the players and rushed us back to practice our tactics. Old Hao, this is the list of the other 3 members and 2 substitutes. There were 3 people in the chat room: Hao Tian, Sleepy Winter, and Twinkle Fried Rice. They were all pro players of the Long Sky Club. The 4 biggest names of China: Esports, Temple of God, Long Sky, Dynasty, and Fried Eggplants with Fish. The players would always be reminded of these clubs' achievements when they saw those names. The big names all had their pillars, like Li Ji of Temple of God and 3 chariots of Fried Eggplants with Fish. Hao Tian and Sleepy Winter were both senior members of Long Sky. They were known as Long Sky Twin Stars. A few young players with potential had appeared in the youth camp in recent years, in which Twinkle Fried Rice was the most favored genius player that might become the successor. Hao Tian, Sleepy Winter, and Twinkle Fried Rice were the core players of the Long Sky team. The competition requirement this time was 8 players, including substitutes, where Hao Tian was the leader without a doubt. Sleepy Winter and Twinkle Fried Rice were definitely members. The other 5 had been chosen in the internal competition. The winners formed Core Team 1 with the 3 core players. The second-tier players formed Team 2. That was how large clubs worked. Hao Tian went through the list and said, these players are all seniors and familiar faces, they will be able to find their competition mode with just a bit of practice. The contestants are fine, no need for changes. He was a god player who had contributed to the club for years, so his words sometimes had more authority than even the coach and the manager. Sleepy Winter nodded and said, the first season is very important. Let's win it. I have looked at the competition details. There are 5 stages, so it will last quite a long time. We have enough time to prepare and continue leveling up. Now is the time where the leading players are reaching almost LV50. When the division finals arrive, the rest of the teams should almost be all at max level. The qualifiers are just the first stage. As it accepts registration from all players, the fight will be the most intense. There will be thousands of teams in one division fighting for only 38 places. Imagine how intense the competition will be. Because of the number of participants in the qualifiers, it will be in the form of single match elimination. If we are unlucky and lose to a strong opponent, we will be out of the rest of the competition straight away. We have to be careful from the start. All of the enemies can be roughly divided into 4 types: normal noob players just joining for fun, high-skilled normal players, strong players from clubs, and the teams from the biggest names. Our biggest opponent will be the other 3 biggest clubs. I estimate that 3/4 of the top 40 teams entering the regulars will be from clubs. The group battle is ever changing, don't underestimate any team, Hao Tian said in a low voice. Old Hao, did you register for the singles? Sleepy Winter asked. Yeah. I shall not go then. Sleepy Winter shrugged his shoulders. He was very clear of Hao Tian's skills. There was a very high chance he would get a place in the singles and earn bonus points for the team in the regulars. Most clubs sent their strongest player to the singles. As another member of the Long Sky Twin Stars, since Hao Tian had joined the singles, he would focus on the team division of labor. At the same time, Frenzied Sword also registered for singles. Different from a big name like Long Sky, the Zhang City club that he was in was a small team. All the members in the club were just enough for the number of team members required. All of them were Tier 2 players, and only Frenzied Sword had made a name for himself. However, he was not the leader. The leader was Lone Crane, a signature player cultivated by Zhang City itself. Yet, he did not have any achievements. Zhang City was a dying team. When they saw the potential in Frenzied Sword and signed him as a strong help, the team only became a little more alive after he joined. However, Lone Crane did not like Frenzied Sword. He felt that Frenzied Sword threatened his position. The management regulations in the small clubs was not as developed as the big names, so it was common to put seniority first when determining positions. Before making any result, pro players were all arrogant, thinking everyone else was just trash. Frenzied Sword was lucky enough to meet the situation and was often excluded by the team. His singles registration was obstructed by Lone Crane many times. Lone Crane's reason was the team needs to retain its power. You are our ace. If you expose too much in the singles, the others will develop tactics against us. The registration only passed after being approved by the superiors. Frenzied Sword did not favor these fools. It was a crazy dream to want to achieve anything with such a team. He had put all his hopes into the singles. As long as he made a name for himself in the singles, his position would be stable. My win ratio against God Hao Tian is now 4-6. He's a top God player. Since I can win 40% of the time, there should be a high chance of entering the top 64 in the singles. Frenzied Sword was confident in himself. He had received tons of EXP from Han Xiao's missions. His level was ahead of most other players, and his ability levels were high too. Plus, all his equipment was limited edition from Black Phantom's shop. Mechanical Pugilist depended a lot in equipment. Most of his equipment was blue grade, his weapon was even a purple, and its machinery type also exceeded normal players' knowledge. It was luxurious. The so-called limited editions were actually tailor-made machinery that Han Xiao had built for him. Han Xiao was cultivating the 4 of them, so he had to look after them. In fact, Frenzied Sword, Maple Moon, Hao Tian, and Bun Hit Dog were regarded as his apprentices. Frenzied Sword knew very well that the reason he was so strong was all because of Black Phantom's hidden storyline. Every time he thought of it, he would feel extremely glad that he had met Han Xiao during the closed beta. I have to get a good place. Frenzied Sword encouraged himself. The registration for the qualifiers went on intensively. Various clubs made frequent movements, news articles appeared in the forums every single day, and players discussed the developments actively. It was boisterous. This was a festival. The players all looked forward to their idol's performance in the pro scene, anticipating the battle of the highest skill level. The players could already travel between the continents. Countless players gathered in Sanctuary 3. Sanctuary 3 was the host venue for singles. Other than the registered players, many players came to watch it live. The number of players in the city increased non-stop. The number of participants for the singles was the highest as most players knew that they had no chances against the professional club's teams, and it was not easy to form a team. In comparison, singles was much easier. Any one person could register. As recorded officially, every division had more than 100,000 players registered for the singles. One could see how intense the qualifiers would be. The participating players were mostly older players that had joined the game in the earlier times. The new players afterward were only at level 20 or so, them joining would only be free points for the others. Some people complained that the league started too early, but their voices were buried in the sea of people very soon after. 8 months had passed in-game since the public launch. According to the competition schedule, the divisions would last for about half a year, and the internationals would only start after about a year of preparation and rest. This long break was mainly to give the qualifying teams more time to improve their cooperation, which showed how important the internationals were. Also, it was a form of hunger marketing to improve the influence of the competition. The competition would last about 2 years of in-game time. The duration of the entire version 1.0 was 3.5 years. The players that could not make it for the qualifiers could only be considered unlucky time waits for no man. Maple Moon did not register for the qualifiers. She was a casual player, so she hardly paid attention to competitions and was completely ignorant of the competition mode. Thus, she decided to be a spectator peacefully. Of course, Han Xiao would not force her to join the competition. Furthermore, a mechanic that focused on building abilities like Maple Moon had very ordinary strength in version 1.0. Not everyone had the skills of the great mechanic Han. Bun Hit Dog, however, contacted his streamer friends and formed a streamer team to join the competition excitedly. With Han Xiao's experience and prediction, this streamer team would definitely just be free points. If they could join the regulars, he would swallow 10 energy crystals on the spot. So, only 3 people under me will be joining the competition: Hao Tian, Frenzied Sword, and Bun Hit Dog. The last one can be ignored. Han Xiao stood before the window, looked down on the crowded square and thought, hope the 2 of them can get good results. The registration stage was the brewing period of the competition. It was also the best period for him to earn a huge profit. 100,000 singles contestants were willing to spend money and EXP for just a slight improvement. A pleased smile appeared on Han Xiao's face. After heading toward to the galaxy, I won't be able to interact with a large number of players in a short time. The EXP I earn now will all be taken into the galaxy. The more, the better. Chapter 295, Competition Festival, 2. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. The first season of Pro League was heated up. Galaxy Times also released the latest episode to analyze the overall movements of the competition, which received a lot of attention, breaking the record of highest viewers. Han Xiao opened the video. This episode was clearly different from the others. The comments were much denser than before, and the length also doubled, showing clear signs of it having a lot of content. After making the regular opening cold joke, the hosts entered into the main topic. The first season of Galaxy Pro League has commenced. Registration has opened for the qualifiers. Players, are you ready for this festival? The comment barrage filled with "always ready" flew past the screen. Starting from this episode, we will continuously bring comprehensive competition analysis for everyone, the male host said. The content of this episode includes interpretation of the competition mode, competition schedule analysis, and introduction of the various strong teams in the divisions. We also invited the leaders of the 4 biggest clubs in China as guests in the studio. Okay, let's first enter a short commercial break. Don't leave, the wonderful content will soon be back. A not at all short commercial started playing for the next 5 minutes. When even the comments started discussing which baby diapers were better, the hosts finally reappeared. Han Xiao was speechless. No wonder this episode is so long. Welcome back. So, the Pro League is divided into 13 divisions, corresponding to the 13 novice planets, selecting the strongest teams of the various planets. And the clubs from some strong esports countries have already selected their bases, which means that they selected their division in advance. The duo introduced the situation of the various divisions and what were the strong countries. Every strong team they mentioned, a barrage of slogan comments of that team would fly past. Every strong team had fans all over the world. When talking about the Planet Aquamarine division, the reaction was the most intense. It was the China version of Galaxy Times after all. Planet Aquamarine is the main division of the China clubs. We have invited the guests to analyze the situations of the Planet Aquamarine division. Let's give a warm welcome to Li Ji from Temple of God, Second Prince from Dynasty, Hao Tian from Long Sky, and Sun Eggplant from Fried Eggplants with Fish. The comments exploded. Everyone knew that these 4 clubs were enemies, yet they were gathered in one place. It was an extremely rare occasion. These 4 were all leaders of the biggest clubs. They had a lot of fans, and they were enemies too, so the comments were filled with arguments in no time. Boss Li Ji is so handsome. Temple of God is all trash. Fangirls, back off. Don't stop me, I want to carry the child of Li Ji. We can't lose, brothers. Hao Tian, I want to give birth to your child too. Why did second Mace come out? Where's the boss of Dynasty? I want to see the top player in China. That's crossing the line. How can you call him second Mace? Call him second Sun. Sun Eggplant is the best. The 4 professional god players, all with unique characteristics, appeared in the image. Li Ji had the warm expression on his face as always, being the most handsome of the group. Hao Tian sat beside him, expressionless like a stone. Second Prince was one of the renowned players of the Dynasty Club, arrogant, combing his hair with his head held up high, fully expressing the definition of too big for one's boots. Among the 4 of them, this guy had the most haters. The rank 1 god player in China belonged to Dynasty, mysterious and barely participated in any shows. In contrast, Second Prince loved to speak badly of the god player in his own team, not hiding his ambition of wanting to take over at all. However, he regularly got thrashed by the god player in his own team, becoming a laughing stock, yet he never changed. All things aside, he was never a burden in the competition, so most of the haters were just joking. The last one, Sun Eggplant, was the last member of 3 chariots of fried eggplants with fish. He was a middle-aged man wearing sunglasses, looking undisciplined and shaking his crossed legs continuously, one hand behind a chair, sitting like a boss. He even had a toothpick between his lips. If there was not the rule of no smoking in front of cameras, it would definitely not be a toothpick. Li Ji smiled and said, "Thank you for your invitation. Come to think of it, this is the 4th time I've showed up in Galaxy Times." "Thanks to everyone for being a guest in Galaxy Times," the male host said. "Please, our 4 god-tier players, let's start with the analysis for the Planet Aquamarine competition situation." They started the analysis. Li Ji and Second Prince spoke the most, Hao Tian almost didn't talk, and Sun Eggplant occasionally piped up. The Planet Aquamarine division was the main venue for China. There was a total of tens of clubs. Other than the 4 biggest names, there were other large clubs like Thunderstorm, Fanatics, and Nine Gates. There were quite a number of strong pro players. They discussed the topic at length. In their eyes, the 4 biggest clubs were still the ones that had the most chances to win. 13 novice planets, 37 participating countries. Small countries did not have the ability to choose their bases. There were some foreign club events in Planet Aquamarine, not many of them, but they were strong nonetheless. It was not to be underestimated. Although the so-called base planet was just self-named, and any country could come to play, this was a naturally formed sense of the territory from the players. Han Xiao remembered some clubs would send strong players to other divisions, creating a team disguised as ordinary players to beat the local clubs, which would make the local players lose face. Electrolux, whom he had once met, was this kind. "Qualifiers will be the most intense stage," Li Ji said. "The participating players average at LV40, not max level yet. With the elimination mode, luck will play a certain part, but the longer one stays, the more battles one will face. Even we can't say that we are confident of every single match. The impact of the luck factor will be minimized. The last top 38 teams will definitely be strong teams with real skills." Second Prince sneered. "Hee, that's because your Temple of God is too noob. Our dynasty has absolute confidence. Anyone who meets us just has to wait for their death." Li Ji smiled on the outside but cursed on the inside. He did not bother about the fool and turned to look at Hao Tian. He smiled and said, "Old Hao, can you fulfill your dream and become the international champion this time? Success depends on effort." Hao Tian's words were few but had a clear meaning. Second Prince grunted and said arrogantly, "Save it, you guys. The champion will be Dynasty." Sun Eggplant looked at him sideways and said, "Moron." Second Prince turned his head and stared at him furiously. "What you staring at, looking for a beating?" Sun Eggplant rolled his sleeve like he was going to fight him any time. Second Prince stood back and murmured, "Savage." The 4 of them interacted, and the comment barrage fired. This episode of the show analyzed the competition in detail. In the end, the 4 of them promoted their preparations of their teams, expressing their fighting spirit and their strong determination for the champion position. Han Xiao shook his head. Although they all look undisciplined, they were all god players. Through the show, his old memories of Season 1 Pro League were refreshed. The qualifiers registration ended very quickly. The official start was 3 days later, so all the contestants prepared themselves as much as they could. This time, hundreds of thousands of players gathered in the sanctuary, crowded around the arena, and filled the square completely. Han Xiao looked down at the square. 3 more days to the start. Han Xiao turned and walked downstairs. It's time. Chapter 296, Sensation. The sanctuary was overcrowded with people. Not only were there contestants, but there were also spectators. It was more than 10 times more boisterous than usual. The players' line of shops extended from the square to almost the gate of the city. The divisions were big events for all players. The players not at the venue could watch the live stream on the forums. 3 days to the opening, there was one day that coincidentally was the fixed Black Phantom loot box sales day. Part of the reason a large number of players came to the sanctuary was also because of Han Xiao. The location that he usually appeared at was already surrounded. A male player stood outside the crowd and looked around on his tiptoes. He should be here anytime soon, the player mumbled softly. His ID was Jingzhe, an LV-20 mechanic, one of the unnoticeable spectators, as good as transparent in the crowded sanctuary. He knew about Han Xiao's functionalities from the forums, so he wanted to buy some low-level equipment. This kind of new players appeared every once in a while, bringing Han Xiao long-term profits. After waiting for a while, Han Xiao drove the truck and arrived at the scene with a 270 degrees tail drift. He jumped down from the car, and the waiting players swarmed over instantly to grab the boxes. The number of boxes was limited. It was almost impossible to purchase them without putting up a fight to buy them as soon as possible. Jingzhe was pushed around by the crowd. After the boxes were sold out, only then did the crowd leave. Jingzhe heaved a sigh of relief. Seeing that Han Xiao was still there, he quickly trotted over and conveyed his intention of wanting to learn abilities. And as he wished, he saw the shop list. So much machinery, and it seems like I can learn abilities here as well. The functions of this NPC are so rich. I heard he was the main storyline main character before. Jingzhe was a new player that only started after the end of the Germinal organization main storyline. He barely knew about Han Xiao's past at all. The items made his heart beat a lot quicker. And after he scrolled down to the bottom, his eyes opened wide in surprise. This is the class advancement knowledge for Pugilist and Esper, Energy Burst and Tier 2 Gene Chain Endurance Enhancement. Both selling for 30,000 EXP. Jingzhe's mouth was wide open with surprise. Was Black Phantom not the mechanic mentor? Why was he selling the class advancement knowledge for the other two classes? Anyway, he could not use them. Jingzhe took a screenshot, posted it on the forums causally, and continued to look at the other items in the shop. What he did not expect was, this post created a storm on the forums. Every player who knew what this meant was shocked. Jingzhe did not know how rare class advancement knowledge was yet, but the older players knew it very well. Class advancement knowledge could only be exchanged after they farmed their relationship points with the 6 nations to reverence, which almost no one could at the moment. Yet, Han Xiao had just started selling them out of nowhere. Only one word could describe how two old players felt about Han Xiao. Horrifying. After being silent for a few months, Han Xiao's name dominated the forums once again. Jingzhe was stunned. He had never thought that his casual post would trigger such a reaction. However, what was more shocking only came afterward. Countless players came from everywhere upon hearing the news and swarmed toward Han Xiao. After they confirmed the news to be true, the entire square's players became frenzied. Black Phantom is the player's blessing as always. Suddenly, there was a commotion at the exteriors of the crowd, and they split open a path automatically. Renowned pro players walked in one after another, Li Ji, Hao Tian, Sun Eggplant, and so on. They gathered in one place and snatched the spotlight. With the Pro League just around the corner, the appearance of class advancement knowledge was certainly a very timely help. No one wanted to be behind the others, so they all rushed here. Dozens of famous pro players surrounded Han Xiao. Some of the surrounding players had not had the chance to meet their idols before, so they could not hide their excitement and screams. Jingzhe was completely stunned. A post that he had casually published turned out to attract a group of god-level pro players. He was used to being a nobody and had never had such an experience. He was shivering in excitement. These pro players led the way to buy class advancement knowledge. The EXP on Han Xiao's interface rocketed by millions every minute. Han Xiao was overjoyed. It was worth hoarding the class advancement knowledge till now. It's profiteering. Han Xiao was delighted. He had long expected the class advancement knowledge to be a hit. In version 1.0, the prerequisites for acquiring class advancement knowledges were very difficult. The players went through a lot of hardship to get them, yet he sold them without any prior requirements. It would definitely shock all the players. The class advancement knowledge for these two classes came from the Germinal organization's central computer. Now that the Germinal organization had been eradicated, the class advancement knowledge in his hands became the only source of it throughout planet Aquamarine. Tens of thousands of players gathered in the sanctuary, excluding mechanics, players with insufficient purchasing power, and players with insufficient potential points. Even if there were only a tenth of the players that bought it, he would still make a crazy profit. 30,000 was not high for the players at this time. Han Xiao sold it at this price because he wanted to sell more quantity and also because the contestants would spend most of their EXP before the competition to strengthen themselves as much as they could. If he set the price too high, he would miss the opportunity on those who did not have any EXP left. He sold it for a few hours straight and only stopped as the sun started to set. He looked at the interface. The EXP that he had received was an outrageous amount of 300 million. Han Xiao had more than 500 million EXP in his pocket through all sorts of events during the 4 months, and it had grown by more than half in just a day. The player's demand for class advancement knowledge is ridiculous. It will be high in the first few days and will start to gradually decrease as time passes, but even then, it will still earn a healthy profit just like the other abilities. Han Xiao opened the forums. The Planet Aquamarine panel was filled with posts about class advancement knowledge. Many analyzed why he would suddenly sell the class advancement for the other 2 classes despite being a mechanic. This even affected the panels of other planets. The other division players were shocked and felt pressured. It was competitive between the divisions, and Planet Aquamarine players getting class advancement knowledge so easily was bad news for other planets. Players from all the planets were discussing it. Han Xiao was very famous in Planet Aquamarine, and he also sometimes appeared in Galaxy Times. However, most of his popularity was limited to Planet Aquamarine. This was the first time that his name had spread to the other players. The players from the other players started to know his name: Planet Aquamarine legendary NPC, Black Phantom, Han Xiao, Loot Box. Actually, every planet had their own storyline main characters that appeared actively as they took part in the main storyline missions. Despite also being the main storyline main character, Han Xiao was very different. He did not provide main storyline missions one round after another, yet the functions that he offered were horrifyingly rich. The Planet Aquamarine players received countless benefits from him. He was the storyline main character, the mechanic mentor, the salesman for rare items, the distributor for regular prize pool missions, the loot box seller. His identity was so complex that the players had never seen any NPC that even came close. His position in the hearts of Planet Aquamarine's players was unique and irreplaceable. It was like they had gone through the change of time side by side. When the players thought of him, they felt a sense of familiarity and trust. Chapter 297, Hao Tian's First Battle. At the edge of players, Li Ji was frowning. Most of the players were surprised about Han Xiao selling class advancement knowledge, but not Li Ji, who was not happy at all. He already had another type of class advancement knowledge, which the Guild of Gods had poured their resources to help him get. It was Li Ji's trump card. He was going to use it to shine in the competition. However, Han Xiao's actions largely decreased the effectiveness of this trump card of his, indirectly reducing the difference between him and the other players. Something that everyone owned would not be considered rare anymore. Li Ji stared at Han Xiao with unknown meanings. A few god-level players at the sides chatted in a group, and as usual, Second Prince was bragging. With the god player, me, bringing Dynasty into the finals will be a piece of cake. An old man like Old Wang would beg me to carry him. If it wasn't for King Admiral 1, you Dynasty would not be one of the biggest clubs, Sun Eggplant said with contempt. Second Prince was furious. They argued for some time, and Li Ji walked over with a smile and said, "It's good to be confident. I hope everyone will be honing their skills. I need some help in the international competition to earn honor for China." They raised the corner of their lips. They disliked the attitude of Li Ji always considering himself as the leader. Hao Tian said directly, "I don't like how you always assume that your opinion represents everyone else's as well, just speak for yourself." Li Ji's smile vanished. He looked at Hao Tian and said coldly, "Then I will see you in the competition. Don't let me win too easily." They stared at each other with sparks flying. Suddenly, a laid-back voice appeared from the side. "Found you, Moran, follow me back to the team for practice." The others turned around to look. A player with an unshaven beard walked over. He looked scruffy and slovenly, but the idea above his head was King Admiral. This was indeed the low-key, mysterious pro player at the top of the leaderboard in China, Dynasty's core. He had an eminent nickname, Emperor. "Don't call me Moran." Second Prince was not happy. "Okay, Moran." King Admiral nodded. "Ah, asshole." Second Prince lost his cool easily when he saw the god player in his own team. He said furiously, "Don't be so arrogant. One day, I will ride on your back and show you who's better." You. The others were loathing. As if he had yet to wake up, King Admiral dragged Second Prince away by his collar without greeting the others. He did things his own way and rarely ever bothered to get along with others, but in Li Ji's eyes, this was arrogance. Looking at King Admiral's back, Li Ji's eyes sparkled, and he grunted in his mind. He yearned for King Admiral's top seat. His career could only advance further if he became the top player. There's no room for error in this pro league. They exchanged looks and saw the resolve in each other's eyes. After 3 continuous days of sales, the EXP that Han Xiao received had reached an outrageous 1 billion. Including the previous 500 million, he had a total of 1,500,000,000 EXP. The amount of EXP storage determines how long I don't have to worry about EXP in space. The next stage of my growth will be lay amongst the stars. The opportunities for growth can only be caught with enough EXP. After LV70, the expenditure for EXP will be higher and higher. Plus, I'm a very experienced consuming mechanic. After entering space, there will not be many chances to meet a large number of players, and there's still the blank period between the version updates. Han Xiao was thinking about future directions. Although the EXP that he had looked like a large amount, it would be finished one day after he entered the galaxy. Since that was definite, he had to hoard as much EXP as he could. Bang! A firework rose into the sky from the square outside the window. This signified the official start of the Pro League. The sound of cheers soared through the skies and created a sound wave, spreading out like a tsunami. Looking down at the arena had now been reconstructed into the structure of a stadium. In the heart of it was a large ring surrounded by 9 smaller rings. At the edge of the center was a large screen, and under the screen were the seats for the announcers and judges. At the exteriors were the audience seats, which were completely filled at this time without any vacancies, with yelling and cheering lighting up the atmosphere of the festival. And so it begins. Han Xiao lay on the sofa, changed into a comfortable position, soaking in the dopamine rush of having just realized one of his dreams as he opened the forums to watch the live stream. There were tens of millions of others who were watching the stream like him. The beautiful female host, Red Phoenix, wore a professional smile on her face and gave the opening speech standing in the highest ring. Her pleasing to the ear voice echoed in the arena from the speakers. Galaxy Pro League Season 1, Planet Aquamarine Division's qualifiers officially commence. We have 2,759 teams and 104,652 players registered. The teams will compete in the wild areas. The arena is the venue for singles. These rings will be where the contestants compete. 1 round elimination, the pairs will be chosen at random. The loser will be eliminated, and the winner will enter the next round till the best 38 teams and 64 players are selected. The qualifiers will last for 1 month of in-game time. Yes, this will be a long season, but the entire process will be streamed. The audiences watching the stream can choose the player they want to watch freely, and our official stream will randomly choose the battles that are highlight-worthy. Red Phoenix finished talking about the competition rules and the speech to light up the atmosphere, then pointed toward the entrance to the arena. Next, let's start the opening battle for singles. Let's give a warm welcome to the 2 contestants. From the dark tunnel, Hao Tian and the contestant with the ID star chess walked out. The moment the 2 of them appeared, the atmosphere of the arena reached its climax. To guarantee the atmosphere of the opening battle, the players had been chosen between the registered pro players. Hao Tian and Star Chess had thus been selected. The 2 walked up to the main ring. Red Phoenix stood between them and introduced them. I believe everyone is familiar with the contestant on my right. An old warrior battling in the esports ring for 9 years, earning top 5 multiple times in the China Pro Player Leaderboard, possessing an honorable and amazing battle history, with a steady and firm battle style yet not lacking aggressiveness. He is the core player of Long Sky Club, Hao Tian. On my left is a player you might not be so familiar with. He's a senior in the esports industry, once belonging to the Temple of God. His position was the core of his club, just like Li Ji now, but he retired 5 years ago. Now, he returns with his past honor and winning resolve. He recontracted with the Temple of God Club, Star Chess. Cheering exploded between the audiences. Both sides had supporters, but the fan group of Star Chess was comparatively smaller. He had been retired for 5 years, therefore, his popularity had mostly faded. Star Chess looked up at his fans. They were all familiar faces. he did not expect there to still be a group of such supportive fans even after his 5 years of retirement. He was quite touched. He nodded toward his fans as a greeting. The fans cheered even louder with all their strength as they saw this. After Red Phoenix introduced both sides, she first approached Star Chess and said with a smile, "Welcome back to the pro scene. How are you feeling now?" "Nostalgic," Star Chess said with a lot of emotion. "I'm reminded of the days I used to battle in the pro scene. We'll always remember the achievements you led Temple of God to and that tint of pride." Red Phoenix complimented him before asking, "This is the first season of competition hosted in Galaxy. Can you tell me how much have you familiarized yourself with this game?" "I'm in a very good condition." Star Chess smiled and said, "Confident to spar with any opponent." Red Phoenix asked a few more questions. Star Chess answered them with ease. He was experienced at dealing with hosts. Red Phoenix's eyes sparkled. She received a request from her superior to create some interesting chatter, so she asked, "I heard you invested your savings into a business after retirement. Your company filed for bankruptcy last year. Is this part of the reason you are returning to the pro scene?" Star Chess's expression remained unchanged and said, "Of course not. The pro scene is where I made my name. Returning is just because I never forgot where I came from. I'm looking forward to battling the younger generation. Hope that I can dig out some players with good potential and teach the young players nowadays some experiences. It will help them in their battles at the international competitions." As he was speaking, he smiled toward Hao Tian with a sense of superiority as a senior. Hao Tian was considered as his junior. The young players whom Star Chess mentioned, of course, included Hao Tian. Chapter 298, The Battle. "Okay. Thank you for the response." Red Phoenix smiled back and turned to Hao Tian. "The legendary Hao Tian, are you confident that you will win today's match?" "You'll see." Hao Tian did not pay attention to the reporter, as if his face was saying, "I am focusing now, please do not disturb me." He had always been a quiet man and never liked being interviewed before the battle. He felt that using the time before battle to prepare his mental state was the more professional thing to do. Moreover, his opponent was Star Chess. Hao Tian had no comments about him. In the professional circle, everyone knew that Star Chess had started his business after retirement, but he had returned for the competition after his business went bad. It was obvious that he wanted to use his popularity to milk some cash. Since they were on different paths, there was nothing worth talking about. The audience all laughed. They knew the personality of Hao Tian, and they all loved to watch his cold, calm demeanor. Red Phoenix's face froze as she did not know how to respond. However, she was one of the most experienced hosts in the professional league, so she suppressed her awkwardness and backed away from Han Tian. "Okay. Looks like both of them are confident that they will win. Let's start the 30-second countdown, and once it reaches 0, the competition will officially begin." The screen showed a 30-second timer, and the audience in the arena all quieted down, tens of thousands of pairs of eyes focusing on the two men on the ring. The nervous atmosphere froze the ring and the stadium. Within the countdown, the judges started the pre-game analysis. "It seems that both of them are from the pugilist class, and both of them are LV46. They are at the same level, so we can expect to see a high-level pugilist battle. This is the fight between two generations, and I also feel that this battle has a sense of ceremony. There's no doubt that Hao Tian is in his peak condition, judging from the uncountable wins. Plus, I'm worried if Star Chess has maintained his game after being away from the scene for 5 years. The other judge then replied, "There's no need to worry about that. All professionals know how to adjust their own status before the game, and Star Chess is already a veteran, which means he has more experience than Hao Tian. I have a feeling that this will be an intense and cutthroat battle." Han Xiao sat up and straightened his back and looked at the dense atmosphere on the ring. After training Hao Tian for so long, it was time to see the result. 3, 2, 1. Bang. As soon as the countdown finished, Hao Tian stomped his feet into the ground and charged toward the opponent with surge of energy covering his body, as if he was a siege tank. Bang. 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 The two pugilists exchange fists and kick with each other. The sound of punches landing on the two's bodies was deep and loud. The audience could see that the status bars of both sides, such as the health bar, energy bar, and stamina bar, were dropping. The veterans would not fight like a rookie player, who fought as if they were video gamers smashing all the buttons. Even in a lower-level battle between pugilists, it was essential to understand the timing of the use of skill and how to distribute energy to continue to activate buffs. They also needed to learn dodging techniques, reset timing, damage calculation, and cooldowns of skills. In the fight of elites, detail determined the victor. The battle between the two men on the ring was filled with subtle techniques from both fighters. Some spectators understood, while others did not, but in the end, it did not matter if one was able to identify the techniques. The audience all certainly felt a special atmosphere in a professional battle. And it could be described in one word: steady. The rate of decrease in their status bars was slower than the battle between average players. It meant that both players used a lot of small techniques that dodged a large amount of attacks from the enemy. This was the clear distinction between professional players and normal players. The words of the judges were coming out faster than bullets from a machine gun. The commentator was also a skilled man, and he quickly analyzed the situation for the audience. It is still a stalemate on the ring. They are testing the water and only using normal attacks with some small skills. Both of their health bars are above 80%, and now, we'll have to see who can grab the chance to deal a combo attack. There were countless styles of players in battle, but using combos was always one of the most popular techniques among the players, especially the pugilists. If they could break through the defense and get a brief opening, the skillful players could take away a huge portion of health bar from the enemy, and it was even possible to one-shot the enemy with one combo. Just like the girl and the floating island, once one got knocked into the air, it was unavoidable that one would lose a huge amount of his health. Moreover, as professional players, Han Xiao and Star Chess had mastered the art of combos, and there was rarely any chance of error. Now, they needed to see how they could start the first combo. Wait, Star Chess is going in. After they exchanged blows, Star Chess suddenly lunged and stomped his front foot on the ground. An invisible wave shook the ring as it traveled across. Knock-up skill, ground stomp. Any target within 2 meters would get knock-up if hit by the shock wave. This was a rare skill, and Hao Tian did not react in time. His feet left the ground, and he was around 30 centimeters in midair. This is bad. It seems like it is a rare skill. Hao Tian got hit, but he wasn't knocked very high, so there's no opening for combo. Star Chess charged forward and landed the first punch of the combo. The lower the height of knock-up, the harder it was to start a combo, but Star Chess successfully found the opening, and a torrent of skills and attacks bombarded Hao Tian. The random and colorful energy splashed on his body, landing 7 combo hits in an instant. Hao Tian's health dropped by a large portion. The judge shook his head and commented, Star Chess could still grab the slim opening for a combo. Indeed, the older, the wiser. Let's see how Hao Tian will react to the situation. Everyone knew that before the competition, Black Phantom sold out a class advancement knowledge called Energy Burst. It will use up a large amount of energy in exchange for a status of rage buff and knock back all the enemies. This skill can stop the combo of the enemy, but it will use a lot of energy. From the attributes of this level of players, they can only use the skill once in a competition. Both of them have definitely learned the skill, so let's see if Hao Tian will use it first. While floating in the midair, Hao Tian curled his body into a ball to reduce the damage taken. The dropping health bar, however, did not affect his mental state. He was still focused and waiting for his chance. Suddenly, he found a mistake in the combo, and he opened up from his defensive stance and caught Star Chess's fist with one hand while swinging his body open the head of the opponent, trying to get behind Star Chess. He used Return of Cloud. Oh no, even though the skill is a midair escape skill, the successful rate is very strict. You need at least 10 points higher in dexterity than your opponent to have a few more percentage increase in successful rate. But they are at the same level, so their attributes should be the same. If the skill does not go through and fails, he won't be able to move, and the next combo from Star Chess will finish him off. Seems like Hao Tian will. The judge suddenly stopped his tongue as he saw that Hao Tian escaped the combo with the skill and land right behind Star Chess. Then, without any delay, Hao Tian's elbow landed on the back of Star Chess' head, stunning him. Making use of the opportunity, Hao Tian grabbed Star Chess by the shoulder and swept the floor with a kick and made Star Chess float in midair without any defense. Then it was time for Hao Tian to perform his mesmerizing combo. The situation suddenly changed, and the audience was left in shock. How did the skill succeed? The judge had no time to freeze and shouted with his eyes wide open. Now it's time for Hao Tian to counterattack. Why is Star Chess health bar going down so fast? Just now, half of Star Chess combo took away 25% of Hao Tian's health, but after only a few punches, Star Chess had already lost 40% of his health points. Part of it was because Star Chess was stunned and could not define, but the main reason was that the damage from Hao Tian was too high. Star Chess could not believe his eyes as the damage numbers popped up on the interface. Hao Tian should have the same dexterity as me, there was no way that Return of Cloud could have succeeded. The flowing energy again highlighted the serious expression of Hao Tian. He was indeed on the same level as Star Chess. However, his skill level was much higher than not only Star Chess but also the entire professional players in the scene. Han Xiao's reward of experience had all been used to increase the level of skill, and that was why Return of Cloud worked and his damage was unexpectedly high. Chapter 299, A Simpleton. Compared to character level, skills could directly increase one's combat prowess. Hao Tian sent out skills one after another and chased his opponent to the edge of the arena platform. Hong. Suddenly, Star Chess released a burst of energy from his body, causing a shockwave of flame to break Hao Tian's series of attacks. Star Chess has used energy burst, exclaimed the commentator. There were 3 ways to win in these fights. One could either directly defeat one's opponent, have one's opponent surrender, or force them off the platform. Star Chess was already forced to the edge and had no choice but to activate his energy burst. However, the next moment, Hao Tian also used his energy burst, and as if a raging wild bull, he rushed at Star Chess and threw a heavy punch that broke through Star Chess' defense and landed right on his chest. Boom! The muffled sound of the impact rang out. Star Chess lost his footing, fell off the platform, and crashed onto the ground, causing clouds of dust to rise up. The winner is Hao Tian, announced the commentator in a booming voice. He won, the spectators screamed in excitement, and Hao Tian's fans all stood up and cheered for him. The screams from tens of thousands of people flooded the arena like a tsunami. Star Chess was led off the center with eyes full of regret. Although this opening fight was held more for the sake of showmanship, and neither of the pro player would be disqualified regardless of the result, it was still a great chance to gain popularity. Winning under the eyes of tens of thousands of people was the best way to prove one's reputation. But now that he had lost, most of the spotlight was on Hao Tian, unlike he had planned. But it was what it was. Since he had lost fair and square, although Star Chess was unhappy, he still suppressed his emotions. Red Phoenix bent her waist and walked onto the center of the platform with a smile. Thanks to both of the pro players for bringing to us such a high-level fight. Master Star Chess, you unfortunately lost. Do you have anything you would like to say? Star Chess collecting himself and forced out a smile. It was an enjoyable fight. I got to witness how strong the young man is. He has a lot of potential. People like him will be able to take on my generation's torch and fight for glory on the international stage. This was obviously just a formality. By using formal language and constantly mentioning the young and older players, Star Chess was secretly emphasizing the fact that he was a veteran. Thank you for your thoughts. Red Phoenix turned to Hao Tian and said, Master Hao Tian, do you have anything you would like to say? Hao Tian stretched his hand for the microphone. Red Phoenix was glad as she thought that Hao Tian was finally going to say something and quickly passed him her microphone. Hao Tian stared at Star Chess for a while expressionlessly. Are you only here to earn some pocket change or something? He then dropped the mic and left without another word. He evidently did not care about keeping up small talk with Star Chess at all. Star Chess's expression turned ugly, and veins were almost popping out of his head. He gritted his teeth. How could he say something in front of so many spectators? Star Chess was furious. The audience in the arena was instantly sent into an uproar, and Red Phoenix hurriedly tried to smooth things out. Kid's got character. I like it, Han Xiao said as he smirked. He remembered Hao Tian from the past. This fellow did not bother with the bullshit that came with being a pro, and he hated being under the spotlight. He focused on training himself all the time and was very professional and righteous. In other words, a combination of a gaming nerd and a simpleton. Han Xiao's requirement when looking for players to cultivate was basically just how popular and how much potential the player had in his past life. It was not that he looked down on noobs or anything, but pros simply offered him a better return as they could utilize his resources to a better effect. With the current resources at his disposal, Han Xiao could easily cultivate a player to a point where they were invincible among the current players. However, he did not do this as it was not beneficial in the long run. All the benefits that Han Xiao had been providing Frenzied Sword and the others with were more or less logical compared to the current players' level. Although the current players had weak attributes, this did not mean that they were bad at controlling their characters. With that in mind, Han Xiao could still learn a lot from the players. Despite how overpowered he currently was on planet Aquamarine, the new techniques that he had learned from the players would prove useful in future fights. Countering various abilities, performing countermeasures in emergencies, movement control, overall macro, and so on were all part of professional tournaments. Players all developed in their own ways, and watching all the different powers clash against each other was one of the interesting aspects of these fights. For example, although Hao Tian did not have Star Chess's ground stomp, he was able to use other trump cards. Being able to utilize this variety of skills to their full capacity and even combine them in fights was what differentiated pros from regular players. Moreover, being able to develop oneself properly also counted as a strength. Take boxing as an example. If person A worked hard every day to train himself, while person B slacks off all day long, naturally, A would have a physical advantage over B in a fight. Or maybe A had better connections and could find a teacher to teach him new moves, while B could only train by himself. There was no rule that said A had to stop and wait for B to catch up. This logic could also be applied to players. Be it farming monsters, complete missions, or looting for better equipment, no matter how prepared one was, in an actual fight, it would all come down to one's performance. Maybe due to his lack of practice, B would get pummeled by A the whole fight. But just before B was about to lose, he might catch on to a mistake A made and turn the round with a one-hit KO. Something like this was extremely common in tournaments. Competitions would often produce with unexpected results, and this was what made it all so interesting. The chance for Han Xiao to venture off into the stars would not come for another 4 or 5 months. As this was right in the middle of the tournament season, Han Xiao planned to take this time to look for more potential lackeys. For him, players were currently the most valuable resource on the entire planet. After the ceremony, the arenas started off the regular matches. All 10 battle platforms had one referee, and all had ongoing matches at the same time. There were about 10,000 players who had registered for the tournament, and they were all currently going through the first elimination round. Each match was fairly straightforward and only took around 10 minutes on average. Only when the elimination stage entered the final rounds would the tournament slow down, giving time for the players to be introduced one by one. As Frenzied Sword and Bun Hit Dogs matches were held on a different day, Han Xiao got bored and went to the forums after switching between several fights. There were a lot of players who were excitedly discussing about the opening fight. Hao Tian's performance invited a lot of praise, and Long Sky Club also released their official message, congratulating Hao Tian for seizing victory in the opening fight. A few days later, players were eliminated one after another, and the audience's excitement was higher than ever. Han Xiao was also rejoicing from this. Aside from selling merchandise, creating more tools, and training with Hyla, he spent most of his free time watching the fights. He mainly paid attention to the team battles where 2 teams would try to fight each other to the last man on a random map. Each team was allowed to send in 6 players: Pugilist, Esper, and Mechanic. These 3 classes had drastically different combat styles and allowed for a large variety of team combinations and skill chaining. Moreover, taking into account of terrain differences, team battles were much more entertaining to watch than the individual battles. The more common teams were composed of a main tank, melee attacker, ranged attacker, and someone in charge of crowd control. The specific numbers for each role would differ depending on the team's tactics. Pugilist was naturally the most popular class for the main tanks. Espers, on the other hand, were more of a jack of all trades. Due to their varying abilities, Espers could take on both melee and ranged roles in a fight. Mechanics played the role of the main attacker and dealt outburst damage under their teammates' protection. Chapter 300, Frenzied Sword's First Fight. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Out of the 3 main class change trees for the Mechanic class, Cannon Master was the most popular among the players. It served as a reliable ranged attacker. Mechanics and mechanical pugilists, due to the early stage of the game, were still quite awkward in a fight. There were close to 0 contestants with those 2 classes. Mechanics were definitely out of the question, especially when they were a player and did not have access to a vast number of resources that Han Xiao had. Without paying to win, the mechanics' combat strength was nothing impressive. Mechanical pugilists, at this point in the game, were like a weaker version of the normal pugilists. Moreover, they even had to repair their tools every time the durability ran out. A pugilist would serve the role of a meat shield much better. Han Xiao did not agree with this meta. Mechanical pugilists were actually already pretty strong in version 1.0. As long as they did not have awful gear, they could easily be both a tank and an attacker. They would also adapt to different environments much easier due to the variety of their equipment. However, the mechanical pugilist class did have a higher skill cap than pugilists, as they also had to control their machinery. The combination of need for good equipment and harder controls meant that there were barely any who chose to play as a mechanical pugilist. Although the mechanics were quite useful in group matches, they performed poorly in individual battles. Players of the other two classes would often consider themselves lucky if they came up against a mechanic. After nearly 1,000 elimination rounds, mechanics had already been defeated 64 times, while they had only won 11 times. Many of the players on the forums had already come to the consensus that mechanics were not suitable for PvP. After watching several fights himself, Han Xiao understood that, as the mechanic was a class that would take longer to develop, and also due to the class's demand for skillful controls, it was not a class that suited the PvP scene this early on in the game. Moreover, most the equipment that the mechanics made was not high level enough to actually make much of a difference in a fight, especially not when other classes also had access to basic equipment. The mechanic class was heavily reliant on the player's equipment, and as new versions of the game were released, players would gain access to better equipment and also reveal the strength of the class. Today was Frenzied Sword's first time fighting in the tournament. The opponent that he drew against was an Esper. Han Xiao was watching this fight live. Frenzied Sword was a mechanical pugilist and had received a bunch of benefits from Han Xiao, gear that he did not need anymore. Frenzied Sword was wearing the magnetically controlled retractable armor and also had the heavy mechanical arm attached to his arm. He had also brought with him lots of other spare parts and gadgets, which all hung on his body. He was fully clad in metal, and he gave off a cold glint under the sun, looking like a heavily armored knight. The opponent was an ice-type Esper. With the wave of his hand, he instantly covered the platform with a thin layer of ice, reducing Frenzied Sword's movement speed while increasing his own. The Esper was a kiting player, and he then took out an enhanced assault rifle and started firing at Frenzied Sword, causing a shower of sparks to burst on Frenzied Sword's armor. Ice abilities combined with ranged weapons is indeed a good combo to kite with. Han Xiao nodded. Firearms and other equipment were available to players of all classes, but without the mechanic's machinery affinity, they could only dish out the base damage with those weapons. Frenzied Sword moved across the ice as he tried to avoid the spray of bullets. He had very good armor on, so the assault rifle was not much of a threat to him. However, the Esper player planned to keep on kiting and slowly whittle down Frenzied Sword's HP. Bullets landed one after another on the heavy armor, but they suddenly stopped. The Esper had run out of ammo. Just as he was trying to reload, Frenzied Sword took this opportunity and leapt forward with the help of the booster on his legs. His legs exploded off the ground and scattered the ice surface that he was standing on. Frenzied Sword flew through the air and rapidly closed in on the Esper. The Esper player hurriedly threw away his assault rifle and took off a grenade launcher from his back, immediately firing a shot at Frenzied Sword in midair. Boom! An explosion occurred where Frenzied Sword was, causing a bright flash of light, followed by a cloud of dust that rolled across the platform. A sound of gears locking into place suddenly came from within the smoke, and a thin metal cable shot out and latched to the Esper player before it rapidly pulled him back to Frenzied Sword. Bang! The two clashed into each other and rolled around on the ground due to the impact. Melee combat was Frenzied Sword's strong suit, and he quickly took care of the Esper after a few exchanging blows. Smoke to reduce visibility and increase the hit chance of the hook. Han Xiao nodded. He had focused on every single detail in the battle. Frenzied Sword was able to use the mechanical pugilist's abilities and equipment to a pretty good level, and he could be counted as one of the rarer mechanic players. Currently, no single player had reached the point where they were completely invincible. All classes had weaknesses that could be taken advantage of. In the case of the ice-type Esper, mechanical pugilists could use their equipment to close in the distance, pugilists could use energy burst or other movement skills, while other Espers also had their own tactics to use. As he was not popular yet, Frenzied Sword's victory did not garner much attention. Moreover, it was only an elimination round. However, Han Xiao thought that Frenzied Sword had shown a stellar performance in that fight. He just did not know if this frenzied sword was as good as the one in the past. Players from around the planet went all out in the fights, and soon, 20 days had passed. 80 to 90% of the players had been eliminated, and the ones left behind were the cream of the crop. Frenzied Sword had passed hurdle after hurdle and had not lost a single match up to this point, so more people were starting to pay attention to him. There was an extremely small number of mechanics who had made it that far into tournament. So, naturally, as a mechanical pugilist, Frenzied Sword piqued the interest of many curious players. Most of his earlier matches were replayed by players. Is this how mechanical pugilists fight? He seems to bring along a lot of equipment. It looks kind of complicated. That combo he did with multiple weapons and gadgets looked really cool, but it seems pretty hard to pull off. What's so great about this? He just has a lot of good gear. Take away all that equipment and let's see if he can still beat a pugilist. Bruh, why would a mechanical pugilist fight with their bare body for no reason? The forums were filled with different opinions, but overall, Frenzied Sword had finally made a name for himself. In a tournament filled with pugilists and espers, his mechanical pugilist class was a breath of fresh air. However, Frenzied Sword's rising popularity was nothing compared to the current talk of the town, Hao Tian. As a pro player from Long Sky, Hao Tian had blasted through all his opponents since the first round, and he seemed to be getting stronger and stronger after each fight. His battle team was also taking win after win in the team matches section. Hao Tian seemed like a potential candidate who could carry the future of the Chinese esports scene. Aside from the 3 core members, none of the other Long Sky players were anything to scoff at. They had great team fights and were able to effectively complement Hao Tian's aggressive playstyle. On the other hand, the pro players from the other gaming guilds seemed to be hiding their strength, so they were not blasting through all opposition like Long Sky. Long Sky players demonstrated an overwhelming momentum in both solo and team matches, and they were the player favorite on Planet Aquamarine. Many video streaming channels were also focused on highlighting these players. Bunhit Dog's Suicide Hosts team had been eliminated in a single round. Han Xiao randomly watched their match, and his eyes almost burst out of their sockets. All 6 members were cannon masters. It was a pure ranged DPS team composition, yet they were unluckily placed in a dense forest that did not favor ranged classes at all. To make it worse, their opponent was a powerhouse team made up of foreign pro players. They were butchered. Although Han Xiao knew that they did not have much of a chance in this tournament to begin with, he was still speechless at how bad their luck was. It seems like Hao Tian has the best chance of getting a good score. Frenzied Sword's performing well in his solo matches, but his team's performance is rather subpar, and they're barely surviving in the tournament.